Pokémon. Chronicles of Darkness. Prologue. Transmigration. Cain sat in his laboratory, surrounded by the gleaming high-tech instruments, the fruits of years of toil and study. He had devoted his life to this pursuit, poring over data and theories with a single-minded determination. And now, finally, as he gazed upon the towering wormhole generator, he knew that all his efforts had brought him to this moment, a moment of destiny. For years he had dreamed of unlocking the secrets of the universe, and with this machine, this beautiful, deadly machine, that dream was about to become a reality. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders, for if he succeeded in this experiment, he would go down in the annals of science as one of the greatest minds that ever lived. But as he rose from his seat and began to run his final checks on the equipment, he could not shake off a sense of unease, a feeling that something was amiss. He dismissed the thoughts, knowing he was too close to his goal to let anything stand in his way. "System, run a final diagnostic on the equipment," Cain commanded to the AI chip implanted in his brain. "Diagnostic complete. All equipment is functioning at optimal levels," the chip replied, its voice cold and emotionless. He nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. "Activate the wormhole generator," he commanded, and the machine rumbled to life, filling the laboratory with a deafening hum. The generator was a marvel of engineering, a sleek and deadly machine of gleaming stainless steel that seemed to belong in some futuristic nightmare. The central platform was surrounded by an array of complex instruments, rows of buttons and dials, and screens displaying various data and readings. Wires and cables snaked across the floor, connecting to other machines and devices scattered around the room, each one performing its own vital function. Above the platform, a dome of shimmering energy was forming, a swirling vortex of light and darkness that signaled the opening of a wormhole, the likes of which no man had ever seen before. And there, amidst the thrumming of the machines and the crackle of the portal, Cain stood, his heart afire with triumph and wonder. "It's working," he thought, his voice barely audible above the din of the lab. "By the gods, it's really working." He watched, mesmerized, as the wormhole grew in size and stability. This was the culmination of years of research, blood and sweat and tears. This was his legacy, his life's work. And he knew, at that moment, that his name would be remembered for all time. "System, how are the readings?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Readings are within acceptable parameters," the system replied. "The wormhole is stable and ready for traversal." Cain felt a surge of relief, of triumph. This was it, the moment of truth. He was about to make history. "System, prepare the probe for launch," Cain said, his hands shaking with excitement. "Probe prepared for launch," the system responded. Cain counted down in his head, 3, 2, 1. He pressed the button, and the probe shot through the wormhole. Cain watched, mesmerized, as it disappeared from sight, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. "It's done," he thought to himself. "I've done it. I've opened a wormhole. The possibilities are endless." But as he turned his attention to the data and the probe, a sudden surge of energy washed over him, the entire room erupting in a blinding white light. He felt his body being torn apart and knew that he was dying. There was no pain, only a sense of panic and terror that washed over him. "No, this can't be happening," he thought to himself, his mind racing. "I'm not ready to die. Not yet. Not like this." But despite his struggles, he knew that it was too late. He could feel his consciousness slipping away, his grip on life slipping through his fingers. And as his world went dark, he could only think of the endless possibilities that he would never see, and the knowledge that he would be forever remembered, not as the hero of science but as a cautionary tale, a warning to those who would seek to unlock the secrets of the universe. "System, what's happening?" he cried out, his voice cracking with despair. "What's going on?" But there was no response. The AI was gone, and Cain was alone with his thoughts, trapped in a spiral of confusion and fear. "I can't believe this is it," he thought, his heart breaking. "I had so much left to do. So much left to achieve. I won't be denied my place in history, my destiny, my very soul." But despite his struggles, he knew that he was at the mercy of forces beyond his control, of the fickle whims of the universe. "No, I won't accept this," Cain thought, determination filling him. "I won't be cast aside like some discarded toy. I'll find a way out of this darkness, I swear it." And with that, his world went black, swallowed by the void. For a moment, he felt nothing. There was no sensation, no sense of self. He was simply nothing. But then, slowly, he began to feel something. A warmth that spread through his being, a sense of familiarity that he couldn't quite place. He opened his eyes and found himself lying on a cold, hard surface, in a dimly lit alleyway, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was alive. But then, as he struggled to sit up, his confusion turned to horror as he realized the truth. Wait. This isn't my body, he thought, his mind racing. How is this possible? Cain couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had heard of such things before, of souls that refused to pass on, but he had never believed they were possible. Now, it seemed, he had somehow defied the laws of nature, and he wasn't entirely sure how to feel about that. He had cheated death. But at what cost? He was unsure if this was a blessing or a curse, but one thing was for sure, his journey was far from over. Chapter 1, Regression. The moon cast its pale light upon the small forested island, illuminating the form of a young boy of 15, garbed in rags. His face, thin and sickly, was etched with the marks of hardship, his sunken eyes staring out upon the sea. Beside him, a creature of pitch-black feathers stirred, its beady gaze fixing upon the boy. With thoughts as dark and tangled as the forest that surrounded him, the boy reached out a trembling hand to touch the creature, feeling the familiar sensation upon his fingertips. "Did I truly travel back in time?" spoke the boy, his voice tinged with confusion. Memories flooded his mind, of a past life as a powerful quasi-elite trainer, rising to fame and renown in the underworld through his affiliation with Team Rocket. But all his skill and cunning could not save him from the trap set by his own comrades during a raid by the Pokémon Association. Outmatched by 2 elite-level trainers, he fought to the death, taking with him as many of their Pokémon as he could. But death was not the end, for as he opened his eyes once more, he found himself returned to this place, his wounds and scars erased. The boy clenched his fists, feeling his nails dig into his palms, as he stared at the creature before him. "Caw!" The creature, a Murkrow, spoke softly, its gaze curious upon the changed boy. The boy's lips twitched, a muscle in his face contracting in an attempt to smile, though it had been so long since he last felt such an emotion. He ran his hand over the creature's back, feeling the familiar roughness of its feathers, and like himself, malnourished. "Murkrow, it's good to see you again," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. In his former life, the boy had been a rigid and unyielding man, a fault that cost him dearly in his relationships. But amongst all his companions, there was one who had remained steadfast by his side from beginning to end. Murkrow, his first Pokémon. Though other, more powerful creatures had been captured, bought or stolen to fight by his side, it was they who had abandoned him in his hour of need, while Murkrow alone had never faltered. "Caw!" cried Murkrow, its cry seeming to echo the boy's own thoughts. Though they had just met, the creature could feel a warmth emanating from the boy, drawing it close. And the boy, too, was surprised, for he remembered the struggle it had taken to subdue Murkrow in his previous life, the many months spent taming and understanding the creature. So much effort wasted, he thought to himself, ruefully. As a Pokémon fan, the boy had watched the anime, envious of the bond between Ash and Pikachu. Yet upon his arrival in the Pokémon world, he had learned that the knowledge gained from watching animated shows was vastly different from the reality of training these creatures. There was a saying in this world that a Pokémon's upper growth limit was determined by its own talent, while the lower limit was determined by the talent of its trainer. The boy could not recall how much time he had wasted trying to fully grasp Murkrow's abilities and characteristics. But by the time he had, it was already too late and much of the creature's potential had been squandered. In his previous life, it was only due to Murkrow's innate talent that he had been able to stand out in the Team Rocket trial, yet his own shortcomings as a trainer had resulted in the excessive consumption of that potential, and then he had cast the creature aside. "Murkrow, I swear to you, in this life I shall never abandon you," the boy vowed, and the creature seemed to sense the determination in his voice, for it let out another cry. "Caw!" The boy, Cain, struggled to force a smile upon his face, but it was a fleeting thing, for his heart was heavy with the weight of his circumstances. He had been captured and brought to this uninhabited island, where he had been given a single Pokeball, and with it, a single chance at survival. He thought back to the other trialists, many of them allotted unremarkable creatures such as Zubat, Coughing, and Ekans. The first task of the trial had been to subdue the Pokémon assigned to each participant. But this was no anime, this was the real world, and the Pokémon of Team Rocket were wild and untamed beasts. As the boy well knew, the moment they were released from their Pokeballs, they would often turn on their trainers, lashing out with tooth and claw, and in some cases, even killing them before fleeing into the wild. As far as he could remember, there were around 300 trialists, all between the ages of 15 and 18, yet after the first task, no more than 150 to 160 remained. Such was the cruelty of this trial, that it claimed the lives of nearly half of the participants, and death was the penalty for failure. And the trials were far from over. In the end, only 50 would survive, and these fortunate few would be divided into various teams and divisions within Team Rocket. The top 10 would have a choice of their division, while the top 3 would have the privilege of leading a team. And for the one who emerged victorious, the ultimate prize awaited, a precious starter Pokémon from the renowned 3 royal families. These Pokémon were highly coveted and sought after, for they were rarely found in the wild, and even the Pokémon Association could not easily acquire them. And those given as a reward by Team Rocket were known to possess exceptional talent. Cain remembered from his previous life how the winner of the first place in the trial had chosen a Bulbasaur, and it was with this Pokémon that the winner had risen to become a Team Rocket regional leader, with strength that reached the elite level. A key training target of Team Rocket, the winner had met with great success and had been groomed as a potential successor to the 4 executives. Though Cain had done well in his previous life, the gap between him and the winner had been vast, and Cain, as the other's direct subordinate, knew this all too well. Slowly, Cain stood, brushing the dust from his clothes, but as he did, a sudden thought occurred to him, freezing him in place. Could it be, he wondered, that his system was already available to him? He had momentarily forgotten about it, for in his previous life, he had not activated it until much later. With a silent chant, he commanded the system to activate, and after a moment of waiting, an emotionless mechanical voice echoed in his mind. Beep. System activating. Chapter 2. As expected, the system came with me when I first arrived in this world, thought Cain, with a hint of satisfaction. It was this system that had allowed him to reach the level of a quasi-elite trainer in his previous life, though by the time he had stumbled upon it, he had already fallen far behind his peers. Still, he knew its potential, and with renewed hope, he focused his thoughts upon his companion, Murkrow, as he commanded the system to scan it. Ding! And a screen of data, visible only to him, appeared before his eyes. Pokémon. Murkrow. Green. Gender. Male. Level 8. Type. Dark plus flying. Ability. Prankster. Held items. None. Egg moves. Punishment. Feint attack. Roost. Basic moves. Peck. Astonish. Pursuit. Taunt moves. Snatch. Tailwind. Technical machines. TMs none. Cain's eyes shone with excitement as he read the detailed information on Murkrow. In his previous life, when he had first activated the system, the screen had been blank, and all this information had been obtained through various means, gathered and sorted into different categories before such a detailed screen had finally appeared. He had accessed almost all the databases of Team Rocket available to him, even those that exceeded his authority, and had risked much to obtain this knowledge. There had been times when he had even hacked into the Pokémon Association database, narrowly avoiding detection. As a civilian trainer, knowledge was of the utmost importance. Only through knowledge could a Pokémon be trained in a targeted manner and its full potential be brought out. So after seeing the detailed information about Murkrow on the system, Cain couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. To his surprise, all the data stored on the system had been brought back along with him, giving him an invaluable advantage. The green next to the Pokémon's name indicated its talent, and his Murkrow possessed the same green aptitude. The rankings of talents went as red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and black, and green ranked in the middle of them all. But this did not mean that a green aptitude was bad, for most of the Pokémon found in the wild possessed only red or orange aptitudes, with the occasional yellow aptitude Pokémon quickly caught. Therefore, green aptitude Pokémon were already a rarity. Cain guessed that among all the Pokémon assigned by Team Rocket for this trial, there should be no more than 10 Pokémon with a green aptitude. Even so, they were all carefully selected by Team Rocket in advance to invest in for this trial. In his previous life, even with a green aptitude Murkrow, Cain had only reached 34th place in this trial, and that was largely due to Murkrow's talent. His own abilities as a trainer had not been reflected at all. Taking a deep breath, he allowed himself to calm, for in this life, he would not wallow in weakness. For on this trial island, there was only one law: survival of the fittest. And the first step in this process was to treat Murkrow's malnourished state. A normal Murkrow stood around 50 centimeters tall, whereas his Murkrow barely reached 40 centimeters. Only by replenishing its weakened body could he train it better, and not waste its potential. "Come on, Murkrow. Let's go find something to eat," Cain said, patting his shoulder, gesturing for Murkrow to stand upon it. Murkrow hesitated briefly, glancing at Cain, who appeared scrawny due to a lack of nutrition. But after a moment of contemplation, it listened and flew onto Cain's shoulder. Feeling the weight on his shoulder, Cain left footprints on the sand as he trudged towards the woods. As a member of Team Rocket, Cain may not have been proficient in many things, but his wilderness survival skills were unrivaled. He knew which berries were edible, which ones were poisonous, which ones could quickly restore strength, and which ones could remove abnormal states. They all were familiar to him. After offering a few ripe yellow berries to Murkrow, he bit into a green berry in his hand. Its sour juice slid down the corner of his mouth, but he ignored the taste and continued to munch away at it. This berry was one of the most common found in the wild that could restore strength, but because many wild Pokémon lived here, ripe berries were scarce. So after giving all the ripe ones to Murkrow, he ate the raw ones, which were less effective. Caw. Murkrow looked at the berry in Cain's hand, a trace of warmth in its eyes. It didn't understand why this person he had only met for a short time gave him the delicious berry while eating the unripe berry himself. It hadn't felt this way since it left its parents, a sense of being cared for. Murkrow, eat some berries first. Although I know you eat meat, this is all I have right now, Cain's slightly apologetic voice sounded. Caw. Murkrow gently rubbed its beak against Cain's cheek, indicating that it was all right. With a slight smile, Cain slowly overlapped the figure in his mind that would guard him even unto death with a figure of Murkrow now standing on his shoulder, and an emotion called bonding slowly flowed into his heart. What he had neglected in his previous life was the thing he wanted most in this one. He walked slowly through the forest, his feet leaving a line of deep and shallow footprints, before finally stopping in front of a dense bush. In his experience, there were often small animals, and of course, some Pokémon, hidden in these types of bushes. Animals existed in this world, and it was they that most people and Pokémon ate. Generally in this world, Pokémon were not considered food. Whoosh! As Cain predicted, a gray hare darted out of the bushes. Looks like that's our dinner for today. With the corners of his mouth slightly raised, Cain immediately instructed, Murkrow, peck. Seeing food appear and hearing Cain's voice, Murkrow didn't hesitate for a moment, and flew out, its sharp beak pecking viciously at the hare. The hare could not withstand Murkrow's attack and was killed instantly. Just as Murkrow was pleased, a purple creature dashed across the ground, snatching the hare along with it. Chapter 3. When Cain and his companion Murkrow laid their eyes upon the scene before them, they beheld a small purple creature standing with its fangs bared as if to claim ownership over the hare that lay hidden behind it. The Pokémon had struggled greatly to capture the hare, but its hard-won prize was now being threatened by this interloper. But the creature was not so easily defeated, and with quick thinking, it snatched the hare away. Pokémon, Rattata, red, gender, male, level, 10, type, normal, ability, run away, held items, none, egg moves, none, basic moves, tackle, tail whip, quick attack, focus energy, bite, taunt moves, none, technical machines, TMs none. As Cain and Murkrow soon discovered, this Pokémon was none other than a Rattata, and the dash that it had just used to snatch away the hare was none other than quick attack. Caw! Murkrow, upon seeing that the meal he had just procured was now being taken from him, let out a fierce cry, his pale yellowish beak glinting with a cold light. The bird was so incensed that, if not for the presence of Cain, it would have launched an attack straight away. A red aptitude Rattata was not an uncommon sight on this island. Though it was 2 levels above Murkrow, the difference in strength was not fully reflected in their levels alone. Now that you have stepped forward on your own, I will let you be the first opponent to face off against Murkrow, Cain spoke, his face devoid of emotion. He had already surmised that this hare had not come out of the bushes by accident. It was not so foolish as to expose itself as easy prey. Murkrow, tailwind. With a command from Cain, a gentle breeze began to swirl around Murkrow, making him feel as if his entire body had been lightened. The reality of battle was vastly different from that of a game. There was no such thing as taking turns. So long as a Pokémon's speed was sufficient, one move could be swiftly followed by another. With a speed value of 91 and the effect of Tailwind, Murkrow's speed surpassed even that of Rattata, known for its swiftness. Peck! Cain's voice was cold and detached as he issued the command. A streak of darkness sliced through the trees, the blackness of night providing an extra veil of concealment for Murkrow. Rattata had no time to react before it was brutally struck by the bird's sharp beak. Squeak! It let out a piteous cry of pain. Only now did Rattata realize that the Pokémon facing it, its features obscured by the darkness, was not to be trifled with. In haste, it turned to flee. Murkrow, do not let it catch its breath. Keep using Peck. Cain's mind was fully focused on the battle, his emotions buried deep. He would not underestimate any opponent, no matter how weak they may appear. With a final strike, Rattata lay incapacitated, and Murkrow prepared to stop his attack. Continue. But Cain's voice was cold, and it rang out once more. Murkrow hesitated, glancing between Cain and the fallen Rattata. A flicker of discomfort passed through his eyes before he pushed it aside, and his beak struck again until the Rattata was completely lifeless. A hint of softness appeared in Cain's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with a hard resolve. On this man-eating island, there could be no mercy. Even the weakest of foes had to be taken seriously. Murkrow, too, had not disappointed him. Despite a moment of hesitation, Cain understood. Only through killing could one survive and thrive in Team Rocket. Only the red color of blood held the power to intimidate. This was a truth that Cain had come to understand through years of experience in his previous life, a truth that he now sought to instill in his Pokémon. If you want to live, kill. Keep killing. Carve a path forward in blood. Picking up the hair, Murkrow flapped his wings twice and flew back to perch on Cain's shoulder. And as they continued deeper into the forest, a silent understanding formed between the man and his companion. Fizz. Drops of golden oil cascaded off the roasting hair, drizzling into the fire. Though it was unseasoned, the aroma of the roasting meat that wafted through the air was already enough to make the mouth water. Murkrow, unable to contain himself, bounced upon the ground, his eyes fixated on the roast meat before him. He had never encountered such a tantalizing scent before, and his desire to eat was almost unbearable. Sitting nearby, Cain cast a glance at the eager Murkrow, a slight smile curling his lips. It will be ready soon, do not be so hasty. It was not long before the meat was fully cooked. Tearing off a hind leg, Cain left the rest for his companion. The harsh environment had resulted in the hair being fatter than expected, and as he was currently weak, one of its hind legs was sufficient for him. As he ate, he felt a warmth spread through his body, invigorating him. As he watched Murkrow devour the hair in 2 or 3 bites, Cain let out a long breath. Murkrow's malnourished body required time to recover, and if he wished to speed up the process, he would require the aid of various medicinal berries. System, find a Pokeblock that can quickly restore Murkrow's malnourished body and talent, Cain commanded. Pokeblocks. One of the skills possessed by Pokémon breeders. As the owner of the system, how could he not make use of it? In his previous life, Cain was an excellent Pokémon breeder, though he had not been formally tested by the association. The creation of Pokeblocks was a specialty of his. Making Pokeblocks required precise measurements and timing. A normal person may only master it through experience, and the quality of those Pokeblocks would often vary. But for Cain, as long as he handed control over to the system, the Pokeblocks would be identical every time, almost as if copied. All of the recipes for Pokeblocks, now stored in the database, were among his greatest assets today. With enough ingredients, he could help his Pokémon grow quickly, without wasting a single ounce of their potential. The moment the order was given, a complete list of ingredients and their effects appeared before his eyes. Chapter 4. Quickly, Cain's gaze settled on a recipe. The intermediate Pokeblock, called the Citrus Berry Pokeblock, was designed with a singular purpose: to replenish deficiencies in a Pokémon's body and restore its original talents as much as possible. The ingredients required were relatively common berries that could be found on this trial island, and the process of making this Pokeblock was simple and did not require any particularly complicated process or special tools, making it perfectly suitable for Cain and Murkrow. Our next task is to find these ingredients. As for training, it will have to wait, Cain spoke in a quiet tone. He would not waste Murkrow's potential. He believed that even without training during this time, he and Murkrow would still be able to catch up with the other trialists very quickly. 3 days passed. During this time, Cain and Murkrow journeyed through the outskirts of the forest, searching for medicinal berries. The search slightly exceeded the time frame Cain had planned, but it was still within his acceptable range. As Cain held the newly made Pokeblock in his hand, a cool sensation came from it. When the sun shone upon it, he could see the jelly-like substance inside, light yellow, smooth, and with a faint fragrance. Making the Pokeblock was not a difficult task for Cain, and the process went smoothly. The finished Pokeblock was as good as he had imagined. This recipe was one he had inadvertently obtained in his previous life but had not used before, so he could only hope that it would work well. With a flick of his fingers, he tossed the Pokeblock upwards. Murkrow, who had been fixated on it, took off from his shoulder with a swift flap of his wings and caught it in his beak. The fragrance alone had already been tempting Murkrow. Cain looked at the excited Murkrow and smiled, nodding his head. Murkrow only ate the Pokeblock after receiving Cain's approval. Caw! An unprecedented taste emerged and Murkrow's eyes squinted in comfort and contentment, expressing his enjoyment of the Pokeblock. Looks like it tastes good, Cain said with a slight smile. But remember, you can only eat 10 intermediate Pokeblocks per day. Consuming more will render the effects useless. The formula states that if taken continuously for 7 days, it should help restore your malnourished state. As he looked at the nearly 100 Pokeblocks in his arms, Cain took 9 and carefully wrapped the rest in a cloth he had prepared, hanging it around his waist. One by one, he threw the poke blocks out of his hand and they were all caught and quickly consumed by Murkrow. Although the effects would not be immediately visible, Cain was still able to see the difference between Murkrow before and after through the system interface. Even the green font of his name was slightly darker in color. To fully benefit from these poke blocks, we must begin training Murkrow. Are you ready to become stronger? Cain asked as he tossed the final poke block. Caw! Murkrow replied with an imposing cry. Cain was already familiar with the training and development of Murkrow. Murkrow's specialty was his speed, and if it were not utilized properly, it would be a wasted potential. Not to mention, Murkrow had a hidden ability, Prankster. Murkrow, Tailwind, Cain commanded. A faint breeze appeared around Murkrow's body. Murkrow felt as if there was an inexhaustible power within him, and the poke block he had just consumed turned into a hot stream flowing through his muscles and bones, becoming a constant source of energy. As the duration of Tailwind ended, the breeze dissipated. Maintain Tailwind so that it only surrounds you, and try to increase the duration, Cain instructed. Tailwind was able to speed up the whole team, but if controlled only around Murkrow, it would consume less energy and last longer. With this, Murkrow would be able to theoretically speed himself up permanently. Though Murkrow did not understand why Cain asked this of him, he followed Cain's directions, slowly gathering the airflow around him, trying to keep it under control and keep it up for a longer duration. Caw! Murkrow let out a tired cry as the airflow around him dissipated and all that could be heard was his panting. Remember this state, Cain said, his face expressionless and serious. The goal we're trying to achieve is to be able to keep Tailwind up at all times. Okay, one more time. Tailwind. Tailwind. Again. Again. As the training began, Cain turned into an iron-blooded instructor. With the system, he knew exactly the limits of Murkrow, so he would not overtrain and harm his body nor undertrain and fail to achieve satisfactory results. Another 3 days passed and Murkrow was finally able to keep Tailwind maintained, increasing its duration from 1 minute to 10 minutes, all while perching on Cain's shoulder without affecting him. Though it would have been in Cain's nature to keep training in the forest until the end of the trial, the rules of Team Rocket dictated that each trialist needed to report to base once every week, no matter the situation. Failure to do so would result in points being deducted from their final score. The Team Rocket base, Square, was a bleak and hostile place, littered with trialists who wore wary expressions on their faces. For those who had managed to survive thus far, none of them were ignorant of what failure in this trial represented. Cain surveyed the scene with an indifferent gaze, taking note of the small groups that had formed. A hint of disdain tugged at the corners of his lips. Indeed, forming a group was one way to survive, but it all depended on the situation. In the face of life and death, who would truly care for the well-being of others? A group was simply a strong person gathering subordinates to further their own goals. And as for the outcome of the trial, those strong enough need not fear opposition. Each trialist was accompanied by a Pokémon, mostly Zubats, with a few Eekins and Coughing scattered among them. After a careful examination, Cain noticed that there were only 3 Murkrows present. Compared to the viciousness of Eekins and the danger of Coughing, Zubats were easier to tame. Taming a wild Pokémon was already a difficult task for teenagers, let alone the effort required to tame an Eekins or Coughing. It was clear that those who could achieve such a feat were not to be considered weak. After a week in the jungle, the differences between the trialists became increasingly clear. The strong only grew stronger while the weak only grew weaker. After 3 days of training, though Murkrow had not battled much, he had managed to reach level 10. Nevertheless, among the trialists, Cain remained one of the least notable. Silently, he made his way to a corner of the square and leaned his back against a stone pillar. Chapter 5. The square was awash with commotion, but it didn't take long for the noise to subside. From the far end of the square, a figure emerged. He was a towering, imposing man, nearly 2 meters in height, with a cruel cast to his features. He wore a military cap and a bright red R emblazoned on the left breast of his shirt. At his heels marched a pack of 10 Team Rocket grunts, each accompanied by a fearsome Mytiana. But it was the man's companion that caught everyone's eye. A black dog, with 2 curling horns of white bone rising from its head and a tail like a demon's. Cain's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of this man, and a flicker of light flashed across his eyes as he cast a glance at the Houndoom. Pokémon. Houndoom. Green. Gender. Male. Level. 28. Type. Dark plus Fire. Ability. Flash Fire. Held items. None. Egg moves. Fire Fong. Fire Spin. Basic moves, Inferno, Nasty Plot, Thunder Fong, Leer, Ember, Howl, Smog, Roar, Bite, Odor Sleuth, Beat Up. Taunt moves. Foul play. Technical machines. TM's hidden power. Rock. Shadow Ball. Flamethrower. Cain knew that this Houndoom was not a part of this man's first-tier Pokémon team. It was likely not even part of his second-tier team. A single, casual summons of a second-tier Pokémon would likely be enough to decimate everyone present, Team Rocket Grunts included. 156 survivors in this batch. Viper spoke in a casual, almost indifferent tone, as if discussing the weather. Not bad at all. His eyes scanned the crowd, taking in the fear etched on the faces of the trialists. My name is Viper, he announced, and I am in charge of this purgatory you call an island. From this day forth, your lives belong to me. And with that, he gave a twisted grin, as if relishing in the power he held over them. The trial will last 3 months, he continued, and you must report here once a week, or else face the consequences of failure. But I trust you are all aware of what those consequences may be. He gestured to a boulder in the center of the square. This is the trial stone, where you will test the strength of your Pokémon's attacks. The top 10 in each ranking will earn 100 points, with the number increasing each week. And as for what you may do with these points, well, you'll have to figure that out for yourselves. In Team Rocket, there exists a valuable currency known as Team Rocket Points. These points could be acquired only by members of the organization and could be exchanged for almost anything your heart desired. Moreover, they were not limited to use within the confines of this island but could be spent at any Team Rocket base. It was this point system that had propelled Team Rocket to the heights of power it now held. For in this world, there exist certain resources controlled by large families that cannot be bought with money. The assembled crowd looked on, eyes alight with greed and determination. Viper stood tall before them, his voice ringing out with the weight of authority. The maximum number of people who can pass this trial is 50, he declared. The top 10 trialists will each be awarded 10,000 points. The top 3 will receive a Team Rocket forged Association Identities card, and the first place winner will have the honor of choosing any one of the 3 starter Pokémon from Team Rocket's warehouse. The crowd hung on his every word, for there were rules in this trial, but they were the rules of the strong, the rules of the ruthless, the rules of Team Rocket. The only rule is that there are no rules. Viper shouted, and with a sweep of his hand, signaled the start of the trial. Under the watchful eyes of 10 Team Rocket Grunts, the trialists lined up, eager to prove themselves. Ekans, bite! A teenager's voice rang out, as a purple serpent lunged towards the boulder in the center of the square. Its fangs aglow with a hungry light, it bit down hard on the stone. There was a loud pang, but not a single mark was left behind. Attack value, 56. Immediately afterwards, a line of words appeared above the trial stone. Number 34. Attack value 56. Next, the Team Rocket Grunt in charge of recording shouted, as he recorded the result in his book. The teenager, numbered 34, scowled, clearly dissatisfied with his score, and walked off to the side. Next, a timid teenager stepped forward, his face still bearing the innocence of youth, a Zubat perched atop his head. Zubat, tackle, he commanded, with a hint of childlike wonder in his voice. The Zubat slowly flapped its wings and struck the boulder with its back. Attack value, 19. The words appeared above the stone, and a low murmur ran through the crowd. The first teenager to have completed the test looked on with a sneer, his disdain mirrored in the eyes of those waiting their turn. The grunt who recorded the results remained impassive. These raw young boys and girls with their newly caught Pokémon held little interest for him. Number 13, attack value 19, temporarily second. Next, he shouted, and the trial continued. Number 24, attack value 25, second for now. Next. Number 98, attack value 45. Number 77, attack value. The trialists at the top regarded those ranked lower than themselves with disdain, while at the same time gritting their teeth at trialists who happened to have a score higher than theirs. This was what the trial was all about, for only through competition, through struggle, could the strongest among them emerge. And then, a shocked cry echoed through the square. Attack value, 98. The crowd turned to see a slender teenager, his skin pale and his clothes immaculate, standing with an Ekans by his side. Cain recognized this trialist as Xander, the one who in his previous life had won first place and obtained a very talented Bulbasaur, leading to his rapid ascent through the ranks of Team Rocket. The tension in the air was thick as the numbers were called, but none could match Xander's score. By the time it was Cain's turn, the majority of the trialists had completed their test. Cain stepped forward, his eyes locked on the stone before him. He took a deep breath, and with a shout, "Tailwind Peck!" His Murkrow, surrounded by a pale white airflow, took to the skies, circling above the square, before diving with all the speed it could muster and hitting the stone with a thunderous bang. And with a graceful turn, it landed back on Cain's shoulder, as if it had never left. Cain smiled softly as he looked at the number above the stone, and then proceeded to walk away. Number 234, attack value 97, temporarily in second place. The recording grunt shouted, and even he couldn't help but take a second look at Cain. With the current attacking power of Murkrow, it was not possible to score such a high attack value, but Cain had utilized both Tailwind and Gravity to their full potential, turning a seemingly ordinary move into something extraordinary. And as the trialists around him looked on, deep in thought, they understood the little trick Cain had used. Small tricks, yes, but they served a big purpose, didn't they? For in the world of Team Rocket, there were no rules, only the rule of the strong. Chapter 6. After Cain's impressive showing, many of the trialists began to employ their own tricks and techniques, seeking to improve their scores. But for Xander, there was little to be impressed in this display. As the final results were tallied, it became clear that Xander and Cain had truly set the standard. First place, number 99, attack value, 98. Second place, number 234, attack value 97. Third place, number 67, attack value 95. Fourth place, number 156, attack value 93. Fifth place, number 279, with an attack value of 90. According to Viper, the top 10 trialists would each be awarded 100 points, with no distinctions made between first and 10th place. And as the rankings were finalized, each trialist was presented with a belt bearing the iconic Team Rocket, our logo. Inside each belt was an identity card, bearing the trialist's number and their accumulated Team Rocket points. But perhaps the most valuable feature of the Team Rocket belt was the cubic meter of free storage space it provided. As the other trialists chatted excitedly amongst themselves, Cain made his way directly to the exchange center. As a former member of Team Rocket, he was well acquainted with the variety of goods and services available for exchange. Though he desired many things, he knew that his current point total would not suffice. As he perused the list of available exchanges, Cain couldn't help but roll his eyes at the exorbitant prices. A pseudo-legendary Dratini hatchling, for example, would set him back a staggering 10 million points. And the same went for a pseudo-legendary Larvitar hatchling. Though Team Rocket points could buy even the most elusive Pokémon, obtaining them was no easy feat. With only a paltry 100 points to his name, Cain knew that he could not afford to linger on the unattainable items. Instead, he turned his attention to the more attainable offerings, scanning the list of available berries. As he began to exchange his points for each and every type of berry, the exchange staff looked upon him with a mixture of confusion and disdain, no doubt wondering why he would waste his points on such common fare. But to Cain, these berries were of great value. Not only would they save him time in his search for them, but they would also prove useful in the creation of various Pokeblocks, which would aid in the nurturing of Murkrow. As he stuffed his Team Rocket belt with berries, his total points dwindled to a mere 20. And with another 5 points spent on common items and wilderness necessities, Cain was ready to depart the exchange center. But as he turned to leave, he caught sight of a familiar figure entering the exchange center. Xander, and his Ekans. Without hesitation, Cain activated the system's scanning function, analyzing Xander's Ekans. And as the information scrolled across the screen, Cain's pupils shrank in surprise. Pokemon, Ekans, light green. Gender, male. Level, 14. Type, poison. Ability, intimidate. Held items, none. Egg moves, pursuit, poison fang, scary face. Basic moves, wrap, leer, poison sting, bite, glare. Taunt moves, snatch. Technical machines, TMs none. A green aptitude Ekans. No wonder Xander had claimed first place in his previous life. In this ranking test, Cain had scanned the other Pokemon and found that there were no more than 5 green aptitude Pokemon. But while all the other green aptitude Pokemon were Zubats and an Oddish, the only green aptitude Ekans was the one Xander possessed. Hey, you're the runner-up, right? Xander asked, his tone casual but with a hint of arrogance. Don't let your ranking fool you. You're still far from being on my level. Cain's eyes narrowed, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he continued on his way, ignoring Xander's taunts as the other man's expression grew increasingly hostile. At least show me a few cool tricks, like the one you used during the test, before leaving, Xander sneered. Ekans, attack. Use poison sting. With a snap of its jaws, the Ekans unleashed a barrage of purple glowing needles aimed straight for Cain's back. But Cain was ready. He had been expecting a confrontation from Xander, and was quick to respond. Murkrow, use Tailwind. Blow those poisonous needles away, he commanded, and with a powerful flap of his wings, Murkrow summoned 2 small whirlwinds that effortlessly deflected the incoming attack. Cain turned to face Xander in anticipation of another attack, but to his surprise, Xander simply chuckled. Not bad, a little better than I was expecting, he said with a sly grin, before turning on his heel and heading for the exchange counter. Cain stared at Xander's back, his expression unreadable, and then, without another word, he motioned for Murkrow to follow him as he headed for the forest. In a grand manse that stood at the heart of the base, Viper sat across from a mysterious figure wrapped in black robes. Between them, 2 cups of tea steamed, their residual smoke and heat slowly rising and dissipating into the air. For a moment, there was silence, and then Viper, his tone laced with ridicule and doubt, broke it. What is the meaning of you coming here? From beneath the black robes, a pair of weathered eyes were revealed as the figure adjusted his seating. The mission failed and I need a few men to replenish my team, a hoarse voice emerged. Viper's grin was a sly one as he took a sip of his tea. Failed your mission? I never imagined that even you would fail in your mission. Reduced to coming here to request someone from me. Does no one else in Team Rocket appeal to you? The hoarse voice was unperturbed by Viper's teasing. They dispatched 2 senior elite trainers to deal with me. Viper's expression became solemn as he sat up slightly. How did you manage to escape? A senior elite trainer was formidable in his eyes, and the fact that the Pokémon Association had sent 2 at once was not a good sign. Whether they were preparing to make a move against Team Rocket or it was a targeted act, a single operation by the association meant a lot. The black-robed man lifted his arm, revealing a gnarled, withered hand from beneath his robes. Viper's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight. He knew the man's condition well. The hand was aged far beyond its years, and 3 fingers were missing, leaving only a thumb and index finger. A poison-type senior elite trainer? Viper spoke with a hint of disbelief in his voice. Only the most potent of poison moves could inflict such damage, and to harm a senior elite trainer of the black-robed man's caliber, the attacker could not be an ordinary trainer. The black-robed man gave a small nod, his hoarse voice taking on a cold edge. One specialized in poison-type Pokémon and the other had intermediate-level psychic powers. He inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. But I managed to hold them off with 3 of my Pokémon, otherwise, it would have been more than just the mission that failed. Chapter 7. Viper nodded gravely, his mind racing with the implications of the association sending 2 senior elite-level trainers. They must have had prior knowledge of the mission, otherwise they would not have deployed such a formidable force. He knew the situation was dire, and the problem at hand was not one to be taken lightly. What of the boss? Viper queried, his voice low and measured. The black-robed man shrugged. The boss already knows. I have no time to concern myself with who may have betrayed us. I need a few men to help me with something. I have lost much strength and I need time to recuperate. Viper's eyebrows lifted slightly. He did not mind if the man only wanted a few men. Will you wait until after the trial is over or do you want them now? He could not help but smirk at the thought of the weak and inexperienced trialists being of any use to the black-robed man. After the trial is over, I suppose. The black-robed man replied indifferently, his voice devoid of emotion. For now, just arrange a room for me to rest. He did not elaborate further. The reason why he did not choose from among the current Team Rocket members was that he did not know who among them may be working undercover for the association. He preferred to start anew with a blank slate, one that he could mold and shape to his will. With a nod, Viper signaled for his men to escort the black-robed man away. As he watched the man depart, Viper's eyes fell upon the flickering candle on his desk. His mind lost in thought as he considered the ramifications of this latest development. As Cain ventured deeper into the forest, the path ahead grew increasingly obscure. The citrus berry poke blocks he had crafted earlier were safely stowed away in his Team Rocket belt, while a cloth was tied around his head to protect his face from the forest's sharp branches and thorns. With Murkrow perched on his shoulder, Cain pressed forward, using Tailwind to clear a path through the underbrush. The Dark-type Pokémon stirred his wings to unleash powerful gusts, blasting away larger branches and weeds. Murkrow, remember to conserve your energy when using flying-type moves, Cain reminded the Pokémon. Physical strength is your weakness, so it's important to be efficient. As they journeyed further, Cain spoke of his plans for Murkrow's future training. As a dual-type dark and flying Pokémon, it's important to also focus on developing your dark-type moves once we find a suitable training ground. Murkrow cawed in agreement, his eyes alight with a fierce determination to grow stronger. But their progress was abruptly interrupted by the sudden appearance of a wild Spearow. its eyes burning with a fierce hunger as it flew straight at Cain. The true Pokémon World was a realm of chaos and bloodshed, where beasts of all shapes and sizes roamed free, and humans who dared to enter their domain did so at their own peril. Some, like Team Rocket, sought to tame these wild creatures and bend them to their will, using them as weapons to further their own ends. Even the Pokémon Association, with all its supposed nobility, was not immune to the lure of power. Cain had walked this perilous path many times before, and the sudden attack of a wild Spearow was but a trifle to him. With a deft dodge, he commanded Murkrow to unleash Tailwind and strike with feint attack. The bird, fueled by a sense of rage at the attack on his trainer, complied with fierce determination. The black blur of Murkrow's form streaked across, the boost of Tailwind increasing his speed as he landed a devastating feint attack on the Spearow. The creature let out a pained squawk as it was sent hurtling through the air. At the same moment, Cain quickly scanned the creature's profile. Pokémon: Spearow, orange. Gender: male. Level: 12. Type: normal plus flying. Ability: keen eye. Held items: none. Egg moves: none. Basic moves: peck, growl, leer, pursuit, fury attack. Taunt moves: none. Technical machines: TMs none. Riding the crest of his victory, he coolly commanded, Murkrow, don't falter, use peck. In the blink of an eye, Murkrow responded, even without the need for Cain's command, his thirst for battle far from quenched. The fast-moving Murkrow struck the already reeling Spearow before it had a chance to defend itself, and the fragile bird paid the ultimate price for its transgression against Cain. Without hesitation, Cain pressed forward into the forest, leaving the fallen Spearow in his wake. Spearows, known for their tendency to congregate in flocks, were a dangerous prospect, and Cain had no desire to engage in a full-scale battle with them. Furthermore, the deeper into the forest he ventured, the stronger the Pokémon he would encounter, and Cain did not wish to expend his energy in vain. His goal was to find a suitable camping spot. With his experience from his previous life spent living in the forest, Cain was able to avoid the more powerful Pokémon and could also distinguish the types of Pokémon by their tracks. After 3 grueling hours, Cain and Murkrow finally arrived at a suitable location. A small lake, surrounded by tall, dense trees, and on the lake's western shore, a hill with a cave, evidently carved out by Pokémon, stood before them. This is it, Cain declared. Chapter 8. As Cain and Murkrow approached the cave, the stench in the air grew increasingly rank. Though the smell was putrid, the pair pressed on, their steps growing lighter with each step. The cave itself was not a natural formation and bore the marks of excavation. This cave must have been dug out long ago, Cain muttered, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. Let's hope there isn't any powerful Pokémon inside. Murkrow, perched on Cain's shoulder, tensed up, his muscles coiling as air currents began to swirl around his body. Seeing his companion's focus, Cain smiled reassuringly. It's all right, Murkrow. Let's see what's inside first. With a casual gesture, Cain picked up a nearby stone, weighing it in his hand before tossing it into the cave. The stone echoed as it struck the cave floor, followed by the piercing screeches of Zubats, their flapping wings filling the air. Cain, who had distanced himself from the cave, heard the commotion and breathed a sigh of relief, confident that Murkrow could handle the situation. A group of Zubats flew out of the cave, seemingly agitated by the disturbance to their sleep. Amongst them, one Zubat stood out, larger than the rest and clearly the leader of the group. It quickly identified Cain and Murkrow as the intruders, but finding them weak, returned to the cave to sleep, leaving instructions for the other Zubats to deal with the intruders. Cain watched the Zubats' actions with a mixture of astonishment and relief. Initially, there had been more than a dozen Zubats and Cain would have been hard-pressed to fend them off. But the Zubat leader's obvious contempt had worked in their favor, leaving only 4 Zubats to attack. With mouths agape, revealing their blood-sucking fangs, the Zubats charged towards Cain and Murkrow. As Cain scanned the data of the 4 red aptitude Zubats, their highest level only at a measly 10, he let out a light laugh. Murkrow, perched on his shoulder, flew up, ready for battle. The past 2 days of training and recovery had only served to fuel the Raven's love for battle and the thrill of toying with his foes. Murkrow, Tailwind and then use Astonish, Cain commanded, his voice steady and unyielding. The air swirled around Murkrow as he transformed into a black blur, particularly visible in the dying light of the sun. A piercing screech echoed from his beak, causing ripples to form in the air. 2 of the Zubats, enveloped by the screech, froze in fear. Their movements slowed, though they did not fall into a flinch status. The other 2, though not as affected, shook their heads, their ears ringing from the noise. Zubats were known for their inner focus, an ability that prevented them from falling into a flinch status. But their ears were sensitive, and the screech caused them great harm. The two Zubats retaliated in kind, releasing inaudible ripples with their supersonic move. But Cain, unfazed, commanded Murkrow to keep accelerating and eliminate them first. The airflow around Murkrow grew stronger, and in an instant, he reached the two Zubats. Use Peck. Before they could react, two consecutive full-force peck attacks were delivered, causing the two Zubats to fall to the ground. Murkrow did not relent, continuing to peck again and again, making full use of the inertia technique he had learned during his ranking test. The other two Zubats, who had been more severely affected by Astonish, had recovered by this point. But the sight of their fallen comrades filled them with fear, their wings wobbling uncertainly as they wavered between attack and retreat. Cain did not hesitate, his eyes narrowing as he gave the command, "Murkrow, use punishment and finish them off." And with that, the final two Zubats collapsed to the ground, defeated. Cain let out a pleased chuckle as he surveyed Murkrow's handiwork. The black bird, though not at his full strength, had proven to be a formidable opponent thanks to his prankster ability and mastery of Tailwind. Murkrow was a cut above these Zubats in both innate talent and battle skill. With a fierce determination, the two of them set upon the remaining Zubats, exploiting the leader's arrogance and laziness, until only one remained. Pokémon, Zubat. Yellow. Gender. Male. Level. 12. Type. Poison plus flying. Ability. Inner focus. Held items. None. Egg moves. Quick attack. Basic moves. Absorb. Supersonic. Astonish. Bite. Taunt moves. Wing attack. Technical machines. TMs none. Cain's eyes narrowed as he scanned the data of the yellow aptitude Zubat before him. It was the first time he had seen such a specimen in the wild since his regression. If he had a spare Pokeball, he would not hesitate to capture it for the sake of trading it for resources. But Murkrow was showing signs of fatigue, his wings flapping tiredly, and the tailwind he had summoned now but a faint breeze. Cain's frown deepened as he considered giving his companion a rest, but with nightfall approaching, he knew that to linger would be unwise. The forest was most dangerous under the cover of darkness, and it would only become more so the deeper they ventured. No, it was best to eliminate this yellow aptitude Zubat and claim its putrid cave as their own before the sunset. Comment. 3. Comment. Vote. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Hold on, Murkrow, Cain commanded, his voice steady and firm. Use Tailwind and let's finish this battle together. The weary Murkrow cawed, his eyes alight with a fierce joy. The battle had invigorated the bird, and though his body was tired, he reveled in the challenge presented by the Zubat before them. Cain smiled, his eyes softening at the sight of Murkrow's battle-hungry nature. He knew that Murkrow would fight until his last breath, and he was proud to have such a fierce companion. The Zubat let out a piercing screech, teeming with lethal purpose. It could sense the vulnerability of the human before it, and relished the thought of draining his blood. With a powerful flap of its wings, the Zubat unleashed a dark-type move, Bite, aimed at Cain. But Murkrow was quick to act, using the acceleration from Tailwind to fly in front of Cain and intercept the attack. Cain remained calm, his mind clear and focused. He had faced death before, and he was not afraid to do so again. "Murkrow, feint attack," he shouted, and the black bird collided with the Zubat with ruthless force. The two Pokémon flew back, both wounded from the impact. But they were not done yet. Murkrow's speed was hindered, but he was still faster than the Zubat. The bat tried to avoid Murkrow and strike at Cain, but the bird kept it entangled. As the night wore on, Murkrow began to tire, his wings trembling with exhaustion. The Zubat, too, was drained and in need of fresh blood to replenish its energy. With a fierce determination, the Zubat lunged once more towards Murkrow, its fangs glowing with a bloody light as it unleashed Absorb. But Cain, always the master tactician, bore a sly grin as if he had been waiting for this moment to strike. "Murkrow, hold on just a bit longer and use Snatch," he commanded, his voice steady and firm. With a fierce caw, Murkrow summoned a surge of strength from deep within. The Zubat, intent on draining the blood from Murkrow's body, froze in confusion as it felt its own strength draining away. The familiar taste of blood did not pass from its fangs into its body, and the comforting warmth did not return. It was like reaching for a scoop of ice cream on a hot summer day, only to find nothing but empty air. The Zubat, confused and exhausted, stumbled backwards as Murkrow felt a warmth flow through his body, replenishing his strength. Murkrow had used Snatch, a dark-type move that steals the effects of the next status move used by the opponent, in combination with his prankster ability to take effect earlier than Zubat's Absorb. The bat had been caught off guard, and now it was the one on the defensive. "Murkrow, use Roost," Cain commanded, his voice filled with urgency as he seized the opportunity presented by the weakened Zubat. The flying-type move, Roost, would allow Murkrow to recover half of his health/stamina for a short duration. Murkrow swiftly landed before Cain, and the earth trembled beneath his feet as a warm stream flowed through his body, nourishing his weary form. As Murkrow regained his strength, Cain looked upon his companion. "Use Tailwind, and then use Peck in succession. Finish him off quickly," he shouted. The Zubat, dazed and disoriented, could only watch as the dark-bodied Murkrow appeared before it, his beak glinting in the moonlight as he mercilessly pecked at its body. With each strike, Zubat felt its life draining away, unable to defend itself. With a flurry of pecking attacks, Murkrow finished off the Zubat with a flourish. Caw! With an exuberant cry, Murkrow felt his wings grow stronger, his claws sharper, and his beak more lustrous. Cain watched as Murkrow's level rose from 10 to 11, a small but significant increase in his growth. But with the use of Roost came a price, as Murkrow's body trembled and he fell from the air. But Cain was quick to catch him, aware of the aftermath of the move. The use of Roost could lead to a reduction in the Pokémon's physical strength for a long time or a decrease in level and talent if used too frequently. But with Cain's skill in nurturing and making suitable Pokeblocks, as long as Murkrow didn't use Roost too often, it would not have a lasting impact. The move was reserved for use as a trump card, a last resort in the direst of battles. As Cain trudged through the cave of the now-deceased Zubat, the stench of death and decay filling his nostrils, he cradled the exhausted Murkrow close to his chest. He forced himself to endure the discomfort of stepping on the crumbly excrement of the Zubats as he made his way to the deepest part of the cave. Through the pale moonlight filtering in, he could make out the faint scratch marks on the cave walls, signifying a colony of Zubats that had once made this place their home. The original owner of the cave had long since departed, as evidenced by the thick piles of droppings that had accumulated on the ground. The cave stretched on for some 10 meters, and as they reached its depths, the ground beneath their feet grew dry, and the moonlight shining through the cracks in the walls above provided some respite from the darkness. Finding a dry rock to rest upon, Cain sat with Murkrow in his arms, the only comfort he could offer for the night. As the night wore on, Murkrow slowly regained his energy, rubbing his beak affectionately against Cain's hand, feeling the warmth and reassurance of his trainer's presence. In those moments, it was clear to Cain that, no matter the dangers that lay ahead, his Pokémon would always be his loyal companion and best friend. Chapter 10. With a weary Murkrow nestled beside him, Cain's thoughts turned to his plans for the future. The first thing on his mind was to continue feeding Murkrow the citrus berry Pokeblocks, which had proven to be incredibly effective. In just 4 days, the malnourished Murkrow had grown to the size of a normal Murkrow, standing nearly 50 centimeters tall. But Cain knew that the changes in Murkrow went far beyond mere physical growth. Through the system's precise scans, it was clear that the Pokémon's strength and speed had improved in leaps and bounds, and his innate talents were starting to flourish once more. Especially after the grueling battle that afternoon, Murkrow's efficiency in absorbing the citrus berry Pokeblocks had increased even further. With just 3 days left, Cain believed that with continued use of the Pokeblocks, Murkrow's original talent would be fully restored. To aid in this process, he would seek out different Pokémon for Murkrow to battle, so that he could familiarize himself with the rhythm of combat and better absorb the effects of the Pokeblocks. As for the direction of Murkrow's training, Cain would focus primarily on speed, utilizing Tailwind as often as possible. Additionally, Murkrow would need to learn some other necessary moves, and those already learnt would need to be mastered so they could be used more efficiently in battle. As a dual-type dark and flying Pokémon, Murkrow was not severely restrained by any specific type of Pokémon, and even his 2x weakness against electricity, ice, and fairy was not a concern as those types of Pokémon were virtually non-existent on the trial island. The only thing he had to watch out for were rock-type Pokémon. With the prankster ability, Murkrow had an edge when it came to using moves, and with the addition of Tailwind, all that was left was for Cain and Murkrow to hone their understanding through battle. As the citrus berry Pokeblocks were used up, Cain knew that a different kind of Pokeblock would be needed to accelerate Murkrow's growth. And he had already thought of the perfect solution. The Black Bolt Pokeblock, an intermediate-level Pokeblock specially designed for dark and flying-type Pokémon like Murkrow. Made from a combination of 2 types of berries, the Dark Berry and the Speed Berry, as well as a dozen different supplementary medicinal berries, this Pokeblock was the key to unlocking Murkrow's potential. The Team Rocket points Cain had earned in the first ranking were used to purchase these berries, almost emptying the exchange center stock. But he knew that as long as they were made, Murkrow would enter a period of rapid improvement. As he lay in the cave, surrounded by the sound of Murkrow's steady breathing and the moonlight filtering through the cracks, Cain felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, and he closed his eyes, drifting off into a deep sleep. When he awoke the next morning, The sun was just beginning to rise, and the chirping of insects and birds filled the air. A ray of sunlight shone in through a crack in the cave, warming Cain's face and waking him from his slumber. Stretching his back and feeling the satisfying crack of his vertebrae, Cain cast his gaze upon Murkrow that had also roused from slumber. A smile spread across his face as he began addressing the avian Pokémon before him. Murkrow, your task for today is a simple one. I need you to flap your wings here until the foul stench that lingers in the cave is gone. Cain had noticed, during their previous battle, that Murkrow had almost used gust in conjunction with his tailwind. He was convinced that, with a bit more practice, Murkrow would be able to master both. And if the bird continued to progress, who knew, he may even learn the high-level damage move, Hurricane. Training his moves and getting rid of the unpleasant odor in the cave. 2 birds, 1 stone, Cain thought to himself with a chuckle. Caw. Murkrow nodded vigorously, always eager to carry out Cain's orders. Born in Team Rocket and having never known his parents, he had been subject to poor living conditions, insufficient food, and constant bullying by his peers. But then Cain had come along, the first and only person to treat him with kindness, and Murkrow's feelings for Cain had grown to be more than just the love of a Pokémon for his trainer. It was the dependence of a child on his parents. With a contented nod, Cain reached into his belt storage space and retrieved today's portion of citrus berry Pokeblocks. One by one, he tossed them into the air before Murkrow's expectant eyes, and the bird devoured them in quick succession. Hiccup. Murkrow belched, satisfied. He took to the air, flapping his wings with gusto as the whistling wind blew through the cave. Cain, on his part, also set out to work after a quick wash and a bite of dry food. He retrieved a selection of berries, carefully arranging them on top of the rock in front of him. Taking a relatively clean piece of cloth, he meticulously wiped each ingredient before placing them down slowly. The tools for mashing the berries were washed with water from the underground spring that flowed nearby, the clarity and sweetness of which was far superior to the lake water that the surrounding Pokémon drank from. Cain's tools were primitive: wooden basins and pounding sticks, manual impurity separators, compressors and condensers, all crafted with great care and precision. The process of making Pokeblocks was slow, but the quality was beyond reproach. More advanced Pokeblocks, however, were beyond the reach of such simple tools. With a small knife, Cain began to peel and core the berries, cutting them to the same size on a chopping board using the system's calculations, removing all the excess parts of the berries, and then crushing the berries to remove impurities. The pulp of the dark berry and speed berry were added first, stirred with precision before the other supplementary berries were added one by one, according to the system's instructions. The amount of each ingredient, the order in which the ingredients were added, the timing of the stirring, and the intensity at which the ingredients were stirred all needed to be exact. Such strict requirements meant that few people were capable of making Pokeblocks efficiently. Fortunately, Cain had an AI system to help him control everything, allowing him to simply follow the recipe and make it. After putting the prepared juice into the pre-prepared container and compressing and condensing it, he placed it in a cool place and waited for a while for the Pokeblocks to be made. As one batch was completed, Cain set the container aside and took out another set of ingredients, proceeding to make another batch. Chapter 11. As the morning sun rose over the cave, Murkrow flapped his wings with determination, pushing himself to new heights as he honed his flying-type moves and increased the strength of his wings. Under the watchful eye of his trainer, Cain, he meticulously followed his training plan, pausing only when the burn in his muscles became too much to bear. Meanwhile, Cain was occupied with his own task, the creation of Black Bolt Pokeblocks. These tiny treats were a far cry from the simple citrus berry ones he had made in the past. As he sat cross-legged on the floor, his hands deftly moving over the ingredients, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of contentment. The piles of Pokeblocks in the containers before him were a testament to his hard work. As the morning passed and the sun began to reach its zenith, Cain stood up from the floor, rubbing at his numb legs. Murkrow, it's almost time to take a break. Let's go prepare lunch for the day, he called out. With a joyful caw, Murkrow flew over to perch on Cain's shoulder, causing the trainer to almost stumble as his legs were still numb. Laughing it off, Cain reached up to stroke the smooth feathers of his companion. Now that you're getting bigger, I'm afraid I won't be able to carry you, he said, half-jokingly. Cain couldn't help but think of the other humans in the Pokémon world, those who had pushed their bodies to the limit in order to fight alongside their Pokémon companions. He remembered the king of fighting-type Pokémon, Bruno, one of the Elite Four of the Kanto region, whose strength was comparable to that of a Machoke. And then there were those like Sabrina, the gym leader of Saffron City, whose psychic abilities surpassed even those of the strongest psychic-type Pokémon. It was truly a world unlike any other. Determined not to be a burden to his Pokémon, Cain also pushed himself to exercise and strengthen his body alongside Murkrow. The advantage of their lakeside home was clear, as the waters teemed with fish for the taking. After a few failed attempts, Murkrow finally mastered the art of fishing, diving into the lake with wild abandon until he had caught enough to feed them both. And with the spices and seasonings Cain had procured on his trip to the Team Rocket base, the two enjoyed a delicious lunch together. But as the lunch break came to a close, it was time to get back to business. "Well, the lunch break is almost over, so it's time to battle Murkrow," Cain said. With a flutter of his wings and an excited caw, Murkrow was ready for action. Fighting was what he enjoyed most. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they were constantly on the lookout for wild Pokémon. With his AI system, Cain was able to scan the data of his opponents at all times, and if they encountered one they couldn't defeat, they would make a quick retreat. So long as they avoided the territories of the more powerful Pokémon, neither Cain nor Murkrow were in any danger. As the sun began to set, the two returned to their cave, exhausted from the day's training. While Murkrow battled, Cain worked on his body in silence. Recently, his weak frame had begun to fill out, thanks to proper nutrition and dedicated training. The outline of muscles was starting to show on his once thin body. As Cain gazed upon the Pokeblocks in the container, he carefully selected one and held it in the palm of his hand. The Black Bolt Pokeblock was a masterpiece, its jelly-like texture perfectly congealed and free of impurities. Using a knife, he cut off a small piece and placed it in his mouth. The bitter and dry flavor burst on his tongue, making him wince even though he had been prepared for it. The complex mixture of medicinal berries was impossible for anyone who was not a skilled breeder to discern. Although the taste was not pleasant, it was exactly what Pokémon craved. As he chewed, Cain felt his strained muscles slowly relax. This was only the effect for humans. Pokeblocks were even more potent for Pokémon. He fed the remaining Pokeblock to Murkrow, who looked at him expectantly. With a smile, Cain carefully placed the remaining Black Bolt Pokeblocks into his Team Rocket belt. Gazing at Murkrow, Cain couldn't help but recall the taste of the half-eaten Pokeblock. Laughing, he scolded, "Glutton, what's the hurry? They're all yours. But before that, you have to eat 2 more portions of the citrus berry Pokeblocks." 5 days had passed since Murkrow had begun consuming the citrus berry Pokeblocks, and their effects were gradually diminishing. But with only 2 days left, Cain knew it was best to squeeze out as much of their benefits as possible. Consuming both Pokeblocks together wouldn't result in their intended effects. The bird cawed in understanding and nodded in agreement, as if trying to hide the desire he felt for the newly made Pokeblocks. Cain sat down and began to massage Murkrow using the techniques he had learned in his previous life. After a day of training and fighting, a proper massage in the evening would allow the Pokémon to recover faster. Murkrow made a sound of comfort as his stiff muscles were relieved, and he closed his eyes to fully enjoy the experience. After about half an hour of massage, Murkrow was completely relaxed and his muscles were loosened up. With that, preparations for dinner began. Tonight's meal was a large pot of delicious fish soup, creamy white and fatty, all going into their bellies. The ground was then hastily tidied up before they leaned against a rock and fell asleep. The forest was noisy at night, but the Zubat cave was a sanctuary of peace. Eventually, the only sound left in the cave was the steady breathing of the two companions. Chapter 12. 2 days passed in a blur for Cain and Murkrow. As they went about their dull but busy routine, the greatest change was evident in their appearance. Murkrow, having feasted on a week's worth of citrus berry Pokeblocks, had finally emerged from the depths of malnourishment, his body now a sleek and shining mass of black feathers. And though Cain couldn't be certain if Murkrow was at his very best, the bird seemed content. Murkrow now stood at a striking 60 centimeters, a full 10 centimeters taller than the average of his kind. His powerful wings, honed by daily exercise, now embodied an explosive force, enabling him to execute gust with precision and even touching the threshold of the mighty hurricane move. Despite his larger size and increased weight, his speed had only increased, making him a formidable opponent in both attack and defense. As for Cain himself, the changes were not as obvious, but he could feel the strength in his body and the clarity in his thoughts. He kept pace with Murkrow during their daily exercise, and though his appearance remained rugged, his eyes shone with a newfound vitality. Even their humble abode in the Zubat cave had undergone a transformation. The cold, hard ground was now covered in soft straw and leaves, and shelves lined the walls, filled with berries that Cain had collected on their journeys. A rudimentary cot lay flat on the floor, covered in the warm fur of some unknown creature. Murkrow, the effects of the citrus berry Pokeblocks have fully manifested and the 7-day period has ended. Continuing to eat them won't have much of an effect. You can now consume the Black Bolt Pokeblocks that you've been craving, Cain said with a smile, as he watched his companion groom its feathers. At the mention of the Black Bolt Pokeblock, Murkrow immediately stopped moving, recalling the taste, and unconsciously gulped while staring at Cain intently. As Cain looked upon his companion, he couldn't help but laugh helplessly. He reached into his storage belt and retrieved the black bolt poke blocks he had crafted a couple of days ago, placing them in a rice bowl specially designed for Murkrow's food. "Go on, indulge yourself. It's quite filling," Cain said, as he watched Murkrow's anticipation grow. Unlike the citrus berry poke block, the black bolt poke block was able to subtly improve the Pokémon and was brimming with dark and flying type energy. The more Murkrow ate and absorbed, the better it would be for him. This poke block would be a staple in his diet for quite some time. In fact, as an intermediate poke block, the energy it contained was so great that even Murkrow, who usually ate a lot of fish, felt full after just a few poke blocks. Reflecting on the perfect taste, Murkrow silently smacked his beak and would have wanted to eat more if he hadn't been so full. As Murkrow enjoyed his lunch, Cain also quickly finished his. The afternoon was spent fighting and exploring the forest. The Team Rocket base lay to the west, so there was no need to explore that side. Over the past 2 days, Cain and Murkrow had spent their time traversing the forest to the east, encountering many different Pokémon and learning about several Pokémon groups. They had come across a Spearow flock 8 kilometers away and a Pidgey flock 15 kilometers away, bitter enemies who often fought each other. However, because of their huge numbers, Cain did not dare to interfere. There was also a level 22 Fearow in the Spearow flock and 2 level 21 Pidgeotto in the Pidgey flock, making the two groups very similar in strength. Today's goal was to explore towards the south. With Murkrow's size today, he could no longer stand on Cain's shoulders, so he now hovered above Cain's head, keeping a keen eye on the surrounding area as they ventured forth. Cain was uncertain of the true expanse of Trial Island, but it must have been vast, for in all the days since his departure from Team Rocket's base, he had yet to encounter a single soul. Though, not all of his peers were constantly out and about, like Xander, who only ventured into the forest during the day and returned to the base before sunset. But today, that may be about to change. After wandering 3 kilometers to the south, Cain and Murkrow stumbled upon a trio of trialists, who were resting under a tree after exploring the area together. Murkrow was the first to spot them, and after informing Cain, the two approached the group discreetly. The three were sitting and conversing, with their Pokémon by their side. The chubby teenager in the middle appeared to be the leader of the trio, and his Pokémon, a coughing, stood beside him. There was also a short teenager with an oddish, and finally, a plain-looking youth wearing a green t-shirt, whose Pokémon was a Zubat. "Jack, are we headed in the correct direction?" The short teenager, Tim, queried, his voice laced with uncertainty. The chubby leader, Jack, glanced at him and grinned. "What, you still don't trust me?" Disdain was evident in his eyes as he looked down on Tim. "How can you say that? We trust you. After all, you achieved a remarkable 10th place finish in the first test," the boy dressed in green, John, exclaimed, quick to offer his praise. Jack's face lit up with satisfaction at John's sycophantic words. "Humph, if it weren't for my coughing not being adept at this type of direct attack, I would have easily secured a higher rank," Jack bragged, his voice ringing with self-assurance. Tim stumbled over his words as he realized the error of his questioning of Jack's leadership. In an effort to make amends, he lavished Jack with praise. "You're absolutely right, Jack. With your strength, you'll definitely make it into the top 3 next time." He had been assigned an Oddish, a mild-mannered creature with relatively weak combat power at low levels. Moreover, he had little knowledge of how to train it. He knew that his only chance of success in the trials was to align himself with a powerful trainer like Jack. Jack, the self-proclaimed leader of the group, looked on with satisfaction as Tim came around to his way of thinking. He knew that although Tim wasn't strong, he was obedient, making him a valuable asset to have by his side. He pulled out a treasure map he had acquired from the exchange center. "As you can see," he said, "the Rattata nest we encountered earlier is marked on this map, a sure sign that we're headed in the right direction." Not everyone in the trials had a clear plan like Cain. So Team Rocket had placed a plethora of treasure maps, some real, some fake, at varying prices in the exchange center for those willing to take a gamble. Jack was one such individual, eager to test his luck. Chapter 13. Cain's eyes flickered as he listened to the distant chatter of the treasure hunting trio. He knew that Team Rocket had many maps that led to real treasures, and though he had considered obtaining some for himself, he had decided that berries were of greater value. But never in his wildest dreams did he expect to come across a group of treasure hunters. He remembered Jack and his yellow aptitude coughing, a Pokémon of decent talent but not particularly high level. The other two, however, left little impression on him. But regardless, they had crossed paths in the middle of the wilderness and they were in possession of something that caught Cain's interest, so why not engage in a battle? His mind raced as he prepared for the worst. Jack's coughing would certainly be a formidable opponent, but Cain couldn't tell if it had learned self-destruct. He was too far away to scan its data with his system. The Zubat and Oddish, however, should pose little problem. Oddish would be particularly vulnerable to Murkrow's flying-type moves. Fighting against 3 trainers and their Pokémon was a different beast than fighting wild ones, but Murkrow had been growing strong of late. With a glance, Cain summoned Murkrow's stats. Pokémon: Murkrow, green. Gender: male. Level: 12. Type: dark plus flying. Ability: prankster. Held items: none. Egg moves: punishment, feint attack, roost. Basic moves: peck, astonish, pursuit, haze. Taught moves: snatch, tailwind, gust. Technical machines: TMs none. After 2 days of intense battle, Murkrow had leveled up and learned 2 new moves, haze and gust. The dense grass in the forest provided excellent cover, and Murkrow stayed close to Cain's back, not daring to make a sound. Cain crept forward, halting when he was less than 5 meters from the treasure hunting trio. This was the limit. Any closer and he would be easily detected. But even from this distance, his system was able to conduct a scan. With a flash of light in his eyes, the information of the 3 Pokémon appeared before him. As he had suspected, there was a level 14 yellow aptitude Coughing that had not yet learned self-destruct, a level 13 orange aptitude Zubat, and to his surprise, the Oddish was also yellow aptitude, but it was only level 11. This proved that the trainer wasn't very skilled. With this new information, Cain's plan became clear. Even though Oddish's level was low and its combat power was weak, it was still a Pokémon, and battling 2 against 1 was better than 3 against 1. And with Oddish's weakness to flying-type moves, it would be the first target. Murkrow, activate Tailwind and attack the Oddish directly. Start with Gust, then immediately follow up with Peck. Finish it off fast. Cain whispered to Murkrow, who nodded firmly. After a few days of battle, Cain and Murkrow had developed a silent understanding, and with a little reminder, Murkrow knew exactly what to do. Cain held up 3 fingers, signaling a countdown, and as his fingers closed one by one, a pale white stream of air appeared around Murkrow, his eyes gradually becoming sharper amidst the black and white colors. 1. The last finger fell. Whoosh! Murkrow's wings fiercely flapped, and a strong wind blew through the grass, exposing Cain in the process. Shaking his head with a wry smile, Cain slowly stood up. Murkrow approached the Oddish in an instant, and to the surprise of the trio, sharp-looking wind blades appeared from his wings, targeting none other than the Oddish, who was caught in a daze. The treasure-hunting trio reacted immediately, tumbling away to escape the range of Murkrow's attack. To Cain's surprise, Jack was the most agile of the 3. As they moved, the Coughing and Zubat also reacted and rushed to dodge. 2 powerful blasts of wind arrived in front of Oddish in a flash and slammed into it as it stared dumbfounded. Bang! Bang! With 2 loud sounds, Oddish fell to the ground. The impact was so strong that it even caused the ground to sink slightly, a testament to the strength of Murkrow's attack. While everyone was busy dodging, Murkrow, who had finished releasing Gust, closed in sharply and pecked at the Oddish. Coughing tackle. Zubat, use bitte. The 2 teenagers hastily ordered. Murkrow dodge. Already exposed, Cain certainly wouldn't hide anymore, and seeing the 2 give the order to attack, he hurriedly told Murkrow to dodge. Murkrow quickly got up and narrowly avoided the 2 Pokémon's attack. Although he did not manage to kill the Oddish, it was already on the verge of death. Oddish! Tim screamed. He was worried but didn't dare to approach. His weak body would not be able to block a single attack from Murkrow. Jack glanced at the short youth who was sitting on the ground crying and sneered. Taking a clear look at who it was that had sneaked up on them, both Jack and John frowned. They recognized Cain. After all, he had gotten 2nd place in the first test. It's you. Jack spat, his expression cold. Cain simply smiled, not deigning to respond. Don't think you're something special, just because you managed to cheat your way to 2nd place. And now you resort to sneaking around and ambushing us, Jack jeered, but his subtle gestures betrayed his true intentions as he signaled for John to launch an attack. John, quick on the uptake, shouted, Zubat, close in on him, wing attack. Coughing smog. Murkrow, gust. Blow away the smog. Cain responded calmly, his presence steady and unwavering. Under Cain's influence, Murkrow remained composed as well. The Zubat faced Murkrow's gust head-on and took direct damage while quickly closing in on him, its one wing emitting a faint glow as it swung towards Murkrow. The smog was blown away by Gust, but during this time, the Coughing was also rapidly approaching. Struck by Zubat's wing attack, Murkrow was sent flying backwards a few meters. Though injured, His physique was strong enough to not affect his combat abilities. Coughing tackle. Jack shouted, sensing an opportunity. Murkrow dodge. Cain commanded, his expression unchanged. Go for Zubat, feint attack. With lightning speed, Murkrow dodged Coughing's attack and closed in on Zubat. Get out of the way, Zubat. John shouted in alarm, as he saw Murkrow quickly approaching. Unfortunately, feint attack was guaranteed to hit. Bang! Murkrow's sharp beak viciously hit the Zubat. After that one attack, Murkrow made a quick retreat. Chapter 14. Murkrow repeated his pattern of attack with precision and agility, deftly evading the attacks of the Coughing and focusing his assault on the Zubat. It was not long before the Zubat too fell in battle, leaving the slower Coughing as nothing more than an afterthought. Cain, his cold smile playing at his lips, looked on with satisfaction as the Zubat was vanquished. Jack, the rotund trainer, grit his teeth in determination to fight Murkrow, but to no avail, as not a single feather was touched. John, gazing upon his fallen Zubat, grimaced in despair, unsure of what to do next. Idiots! Jack bellowed, his thick neck reddening with anger. Can you two stop gawking over there? He's all alone. Go and get him. Are you waiting to be killed? The consequences for the three of them would be dire if the Coughing were to fall as well, and Jack's forehead was slick with sweat at the thought. His words spurred John into action, who pulled a dagger from his storage belt and held it tightly in his hand. Even Tim, who had been sitting dazed on the ground, stood up tremblingly, his eyes red with determination. Together, the two of them charged towards Cain. But Cain's expression remained unchanged, his past as a member of Team Rocket having hardened him to the violence before him. Despite his current physical weakness, his training in combat techniques made quick work of the two teens before him. Murkrow, he commanded his companion, let's take care of that chubby trainer first. With a fierce caw, Murkrow raised his wings and swooped down upon Jack, his sharp claws slicing through the trainer's throat without hesitation. Jack desperately grasped at his neck, attempting to speak, but no words came out as his body went limp and crumpled to the ground. Soon after, Coughing also succumbed to Murkrow's relentless onslaught, resulting in all three of the opposing Pokémon being defeated. Cain was indifferent to the pleading gazes of the three before him, for he had long ago learned that the world was not a kind one. Survival was a battle, and to show mercy to one's enemies was to ensure one's own demise. In this test of strength, only the strongest would emerge victorious. With practiced ease, Cain deftly unbuckled the storage belts of the trio and led Murkrow away from the scene. The stench of blood would soon attract the wild Pokémon of the forest, and the fallen bodies would serve as sustenance for their hunger. After wandering for an indeterminate amount of time, Cain and Murkrow sat beneath a tree. Cain offered his companion a few black bolt pokeblocks to restore his strength before emptying the contents of the three belts onto the ground. There was little of value among the items, but Cain pocketed a dagger, some food, and other necessities for surviving in the wilderness. What caught Cain's attention, however, was a bottle of healing spray in the possession of the youth dressed in green. He could only assume it was obtained through looting, but it was a useful find nonetheless. As he examined a tattered treasure map in his hand, Cain couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. The map, left behind by Team Rocket as a reward for newcomers, was poorly drawn and the written instructions were barely legible. But the trio had mentioned that the treasure was located due south of the cave, and according to the map, it lay within the Caterpie territory, beyond the Rattata and Weedle territories. The chubby teenager had claimed they had already passed through the Rattata territory, leaving only one more hurdle to overcome before reaching the treasure. As Cain and Murkrow ventured deeper into the forest, they soon found themselves approaching the Weedle territory. Compared to the Caterpie territory where the treasure was said to be buried, the Weedle territory was far more treacherous. Bug-type Pokémon grow at an alarming rate, Cain muttered, so we must be careful. There are sure to be Beedrills here, and they're a force to be reckoned with. For it was not their strength alone that made the Beedrills so feared, but their collective consciousness, which meant that if one were to cross them, the entire hive would turn against the offender. And their intolerance for outsiders was legendary, leading to swift and merciless attacks. Let's hope there are fewer Beedrill here, or else we'll have to take a detour, Cain said with a bitter smile, imagining the prospect of facing a swarm of vicious insects. The rough map in his possession offered little guidance, and taking a detour could lead to unknown dangers, rivers to be crossed, powerful Pokémon to be encountered. Known dangers were preferable to the unknown. With a dagger in hand, Cain ventured deeper into the forest, cutting away thorns and branches as Murkrow silently flew overhead. They had traveled for several kilometers since their battle with the trio. As they entered the Weedle territory, both Cain and Murkrow kept their movements and noise to a minimum, hoping to avoid alerting the Beedrill that were known to reside there. As they progressed, Cain was relieved to find that they had not yet encountered any weedles, kakunas, or beedrills. But that relief was short-lived as they came upon a dense forest ahead of them, the trees thick with golden cocoons hanging from them. The greenery was dotted with these golden clusters, and a deep sense of unease washed over Cain. Pausing to take in the sight, Cain observed the area carefully. It was a relief that there was no beedrill in sight, but the kakunas couldn't be underestimated. They could evolve into beedrills at the slightest provocation, and the sheer number of them made Murkrow uneasy. Moving with even greater caution, it took 2 hours for them to pass through the Weedle territory. But Cain knew that it wouldn't be long before this area was overrun by beedrills, and according to their characteristics, it would soon become one of the most powerful groups in the forest. Chapter 15. Cain delicately brushed away the droplets of sweat that had gathered on his forehead, a result of his mounting anxiety. The thought of the kakunas, peaceful as they may seem, suddenly morphing into the aggressive beedrills mid-journey was a terrifying one. Even if they were able to flee, the chances of sustaining a serious injury were alarmingly high, and if they were to be poisoned, their chances of survival without an antidote were slim at best. But finally, they emerged from the kakuna forest, and the air felt fresher on their faces. Murkrow, who had been repressed for so long, soared wildly through the sky. Next on their journey was the Caterpie's territory, and judging by the situation in the Weedle's territory, it too had probably become a metapod forest. But compared to the kakunas, metapods were relatively docile Pokémon. As long as Cain and Murkrow didn't take the initiative to attack, there was little danger. Even in their evolved form as Butterfree, their gentle disposition would remain unchanged. With a glance at the map to make sure they were on the right path, Cain was finally able to straighten up and relax. Murkrow flew through the air like a bird that had just been released from its cage, and it seemed he wouldn't stop any time soon. As the sun set in the west, shadows intertwined across the ground. In the Caterpie's territory, Cain passed by a metapod quietly waiting to break out of its cocoon and become a Butterfree. Finally, they reached the small hill marked on the map. At the top of the hill was a large, thick tree, and the treasure was supposedly buried near it. But to Cain's surprise, a Pokémon with 2 large horns on its head was crouching near the tree, moving around as if it was searching for something. Cain waved his hand into the sky, signaling Murkrow to come down. Seeing Cain's beckoning, Murkrow immediately stopped hovering and quickly glided towards him. Together, they headed straight for the small hill, and when they were 5 meters away, Cain used his system to scan the data of the Pokémon in front of them. Pokémon: Pinsir, orange. Gender: female. Level: 18. Type: bug. Ability: Hyper Cutter. Held items: Resin. Egg moves: Faint. Basic moves: Clamp, Focus Energy, Bind, Seismic Toss, Harden, Revenge, Vital Throw. Taunt moves: Bug Bite. Technical machines: TMs none. Cain's eyes narrowed as he studied the data of the Pinsir before him. He was intimately familiar with this Pokémon, as he had once owned a green aptitude Pinsir in his previous life. It had possessed the coveted Moxie ability and served as the main attacker on his team. With a formidable attack value of 125, a sturdy defense value of 100, and an alarming speed value of 85, it would have been highly sought after if not for its weak growth potential and inability to evolve. Pinsir, even now, was known as a formidable opponent for trainers, particularly those just starting out. Its violent temper and tendency to attack anyone who came near it made it a force to be reckoned with. Its large horns were deadly weapons, and once ensnared by them, escape was impossible. The Pinsir before Cain was level 18 and, while it possessed an orange aptitude, it was arguably the strongest opponent he and Murkrow had encountered thus far. This hill was clearly its territory, and if Cain desired to claim the treasure, he would have to confront it. Murkrow, be careful not to get caught by its horns later, Cain warned seriously. Thankfully, Murkrow was a dark and flying-type Pokémon, and flying-type moves were able to deal twice as much damage to Pinsir. Caw! Murkrow acknowledged, sensing that this would not be an easy fight. Cain's mind raced as he formulated a plan. It was best to avoid direct physical contact with the Pinsir, and a tactic gradually took shape in his mind. Murkrow gust. Murkrow obeyed, and the Pinsir, who had been happily eating, felt a sharp pain as the flying-type move hit its body. Anger flooded its heart. As the local tyrant, it was used to bullying others. When had it ever been actively attacked? And to be disturbed while enjoying a delicious meal was an insult it would not tolerate. Krua! The Pinsir roared as it charged furiously towards Murkrow, determined to make the little bird pay for interrupting its meal. As it ran, it took a deep breath and concentrated, a stream of air appearing from the bottom of its feet and circling around it. The Pinsir had activated Focus Energy, increasing its chances of hitting vital points. As one might expect, with its high attack value and the potential to strike a vital point using focus energy, Pinsir had the power to instantly fell Murkrow with a single hit. Sensing Pinsir's change, Cain acted quickly. "Murkrow, use Snatch," he commanded. A black aura engulfed Pinsir, instantly dissipating the airflow it had gathered. At the same time, a similar aura enveloped Murkrow, and he felt the effects contained within it. Snatch, a dark-type status move that, combined with Murkrow's prankster ability, allowed him to snatch the effect of focus energy from Pinsir. Murkrow took advantage of the newfound effect, his eyes sharpening as he locked onto Pinsir's flailing arms and running legs, noting the lack of coordination in every movement. In that moment, he knew that if he could strike those points, he would be able to cause significant damage to Pinsir. "Murkrow, keep using Gust," Cain instructed. Murkrow's wings shook, and a sharper airflow than before appeared, targeting the very spot he had identified as uncoordinated in Pinsir's movements. Bang! Bang! Two powerful winds struck Pinsir. "Crua!" Pinsir cried out in pain, unable to understand why its commonly used move had no effect. A sharp pain was felt all over its body, more painful than the previous attack. Pinsir's eyes became bloodshot as it roared in frustration. Unable to fly, Pinsir was at a disadvantage against the cunning Murkrow. The feeling of being attacked and unable to hit back was unbearable. Helplessly, it prepared to use its least favored move. By exerting energy all over its body and tensing up, Pinsir used Harden, a move capable of boosting its defense. Chapter 16. As Cain watched Pinsir's actions, he could not help but stifle a chuckle. This was one of the key differences between wild Pokémon and those trained by a trainer. Without instruction, wild Pokémon fought with their own intelligence and instincts. "Use Snatch again," Cain commanded. Pinsir was tensing its body, but it was unaware that its opponent had been waiting for it to use this move. The familiar black aura reappeared around it as the effect of Murkrow's Snatch returned. Pinsir was taken aback after using Harden. Even though it wasn't a move it commonly used, it should have had some effect. Still not convinced, it used Harden once more. This time, Pinsir finally saw the black aura flying from its side towards Murkrow, and while it didn't know what it was, it realized it was the work of that pesky black creature in the sky it had never seen before. On the other hand, Murkrow was also feeling the effects of the two Harden moves. His feathers stiffened and made a metallic sound as they rubbed against each other, feeling as if he was clad in armor. "Crua! Crua!" Pinsir could do nothing but roar. After taking another blow, it gave up, turned around, and ran. In the face of such a shameless opponent, running was the only option left. But how could its speed compare to Murkrow, who not only had a higher base speed but also received a double speed boost from Tailwind? After a series of attacks from Murkrow with the added effect of focus energy, Pinsir finally fell helplessly. But this time, Cain didn't let Murkrow kill it, not out of mercy, or because he wanted to catch it, but because he believed that this Pinsir would make for a valuable leveling partner. Just by defeating it, Murkrow leveled up to 13, which showed that defeating a Pokémon across many levels would give Murkrow a lot of experience. Caw! After defeating Pinsir, Murkrow cried out with great vigor, having never fought so well, no, it should be said, attacked so well. Who wouldn't want to be able to attack with abandon and not have to worry about taking any damage? Cain paid no attention to the fallen Pinsir, its body motionless on the ground. Though selected by Cain as the perfect match for Murkrow, the fate of Pinsir was uncertain, and it was debatable whether or not it had been fortunate to have escaped with its life. As they stood beneath the lush canopy of leaves and dense branches, the sunlight was obscured and a chill descended upon them. Cain picked up a fallen branch and, with a nonchalant air, began to dig into the loose soil near the tree. Using only this primitive method, he found the soil to be quite pliable and the task was completed with ease. Murkrow, meanwhile, had flown circles around the tree and was now perched atop its highest branch, nodding in approval of its robust growth. With a resounding thud, Cain brought the branch down with force, striking a hard object. Discarding the branch, he cleared the dirt with his hands to reveal a gleaming metal box. As Cain surveyed the excavated earth, it was clear that the metal box had been buried only about 10 centimeters deep. His eyes flickered as he realized the ease of the digging. It seemed the box had not been buried with much intention of concealment, likely just for amusement. Cain handled the box with care, noting its light weight. A silvery white laptop-sized container was now fully exposed. Murkrow, sensing Cain's actions, flew down from the tree and stood attentively beside him, his curiosity piqued. Cain sat cross-legged, placing the box on his lap, and noticed a small lock that prevented it from opening. "Murkrow," he commanded, "gently peck this lock open." With a satisfying ding, Murkrow complied and the lock was easily broken. As Cain opened the box, His face twitched involuntarily at the sight within. A hand-sized disc, shimmering white, and nothing else. He couldn't help but feel the haphazard nature of Team Rocket's operations, a poorly drawn treasure map worth a mere 100 points, a seemingly random burying spot, and a box containing only this disc. He shook his head, banishing these disordered thoughts from his mind. Cain was content with the disc he had found. It was a TM, a valuable item, and though the move it contained was not specified, the fact that it radiated a white light suggested it was of the normal type. Regardless of the move, it was worth more than 100 points. He carefully placed the box in his storage belt, knowing he wouldn't be able to use it now. He would have to wait until he returned to base to see if Murkrow could learn the move, and if not, he would sell the TM to Team Rocket for some points. Cain knew that points in Team Rocket could be earned not only through ranking tests but also through the exchange of items and the completion of certain tasks. On the trial island, these tasks included cleaning or picking berries, but they were often menial and only earned 1 point per task. Cain surmised that the more challenging tasks had yet to be assigned to the new batch of trialists, as Team Rocket, while not opposed to the death of the trialists, did not wish to waste resources. Furthermore, all the current trialists had tamed a Pokémon and, though not particularly strong, were still more valuable than average individuals. Team Rocket typically offered 70% of the item's worth in exchange for points. An item valued at 100 points, for example, would be traded for 70 Team Rocket points. This system ensured that Team Rocket never lacked for funds. Despite this, many still traded rare items for points as Team Rocket possessed a vast array of items not available elsewhere. If Cain was fortunate and the TM recorded a rare move, the value could reach tens of thousands of points. Cain sat contemplatively, propping his head in his hands as he considered his options. Murkrow's recovery plan had been completed and was successful, though it was uncertain if Murkrow had fully regained his strength. With the most pressing matter resolved, Cain would now need to devise a comprehensive plan for the next 2 months on the island. First, as resources and time were limited, he would not catch any additional Pokémon and instead focus on training Murkrow. Secondly, leveling up Murkrow was of paramount importance, as it was currently at a lower level compared to most other trialists' Pokémon. During his treasure hunting, Cain had gradually formed a plan, and it was only after defeating the level 18 Pinsir that he felt confident in its feasibility. Murkrow was a Pokémon of the Dark and Flying type. These types held a natural advantage against Psychic and Ghost types, which were difficult to come by on the island. However, Flying types were also effective against Grass, Bug, and Fighting types, all of which were abundant on the island. The territories they had traversed before, the Weedle territory and the Caterpie territory, were ideal training grounds for Flying-type Pokémon. Though the Weedle had evolved into Kakuna and the Caterpie into Metapod, this posed little threat. Even if a swarm of Beedrills and Butterfrees were to appear, Murkrow with Tailwind and Prankster could use guerrilla tactics and avoid danger. Chapter 17. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Cain knew that there was not enough time left in the day to engage in battle with the Beedrills. The swarm was a formidable foe, and it would not be wise to face them in the dark of night. Cain and Murkrow made their way back up the slope to the enormous tree, a former home of the powerful Pinsir. Though it was too dangerous to linger in the forest at night, the tree offered a safe haven for Cain and Murkrow, as Murkrow had bested Pinsir in battle and now had a claim to the tree. Upon their return, however, they discovered that Pinsir was nowhere to be found. Cain couldn't tell if it had left on its own accord or if it had been taken by another Pokémon. The hill on which they stood was situated in the territory of the Caterpie and Metapod, with a Kakuna to the north, Oddish and powerful Gloom to the east, Pinsirs of equal strength to the one defeated by Murkrow to the south, and other weak Pokémon scattered to the west. As the fire crackled and danced beneath the tree, Cain prepared a simple meal for himself and Murkrow. He placed Murkrow's Pokeblock in a wooden bowl for the bird to eat and pulled out some dried meat to roast over the fire. As he watched Murkrow eagerly devour the Pokeblock and meat, Cain couldn't help but smile. Despite the sparse meal, it was more than enough to replenish the energy expended in the day's battles. The forest, usually so serene, was alive with the sounds of the night as Cain and Murkrow ascended to the topmost branch of the tree and nestled themselves in for the night, their exhaustion from the day's journey taking hold quickly, and they fell into a peaceful slumber. The night passed without incident, and as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, Cain and Murkrow awoke, refreshed and ready for the day ahead. The wilds had a transformative effect on Cain, purging him of the vices he had indulged in during his previous life when his strength had reached the level of a quasi-elite trainer. He quickly ate his breakfast and set out for his destination, the Kakuna territory. As he passed through the territories of the Caterpie and Metapods, he made his way to the forest thick with Kakunas that he had scouted before. As a bug-type Pokémon, a Weedle with the right resources could evolve into a formidable Beedrill in just 15 days, but its earlier evolutions were weak and vulnerable. Normally, a Weedle could only use String Shot and Poison Sting, and its low HP and defense made it an easy target. Though its defense improved slightly upon evolving into a Kakuna, its limited moveset, consisting only of Harden, made it a sitting duck for predators, unable to defend itself. Team Rocket's map indicated that this area had once been home only to Weedles, but it seemed that a new batch of Kakunas had recently appeared. Cain quickly scanned the area and found that the Kakunas were generally around level 7 or 8, but their numbers were high, making them a valuable source of experience. And so, with no mercy in his heart, Cain set out to eradicate the vulnerable Kakunas. Murkrow, unleash Gust upon these Kakunas. Widen your attack range and eliminate as many as you can, Cain commanded, as he and Murkrow prepared for battle. Murkrow let out a caw and puffed out his chest, as if to say, "Leave it to me, I'll make quick work of these immobile chickens." As he acted with confidence, Cain couldn't help but remember how, on their previous journey through this forest, Murkrow hadn't dared to make a sound. Previously, when they traversed the forest, they had found themselves surrounded by Kakunas, with a constant fear of an accident that would cause them to break out of their cocoons and catch Cain and Murkrow behind enemy lines. But now, the tables had turned. They had the upper hand, with the advantage of speed and agility, giving them the freedom to strike, retreat, or move at will, leaving their enemies powerless to stop them. The Kakunas in this section of the forest were but a fraction of their entire territory. With a flap of his wings, Murkrow unleashed 2 small whirlwinds that quickly grew in size and power. Dozens of Kakunas were swept up in the gusts, their cries of horror and despair filling the air. The remaining Kakunas, still hanging from the trees, trembled and wailed in desperation, but Murkrow showed no mercy. Without hesitation, Murkrow unleashed 2 more whirlwinds, decimating the remaining Kakunas. Cain watched with satisfaction as his companion displayed his prowess. But the task ahead was daunting. This was just the beginning of the battle. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The familiar sound of bees filled the air and Cain's expression grew grim. Could it be that his calculations had been off and a swarm of beedrills had already evolved in the heart of this territory? If so, his plans would be thwarted. But relief washed over him as a small group of beedrills came into view, no more than 5 in number. Though still a formidable foe, it was a manageable number. Cain was no stranger to beedrills, having encountered them in his previous life, in anime, and in the games he had played on Earth. He had always considered them to be average Pokémon, their strength lying in their numbers. But that all changed when he met Giovanni's Beedrill. With resources that most could only dream of, Giovanni had invested heavily in his Beedrill, turning it into a formidable opponent. Cain remembered reading in the manga how Giovanni's Beedrill had defeated Johto champion Lance's Dragonite. On one side was a common, if not below average, bug-type Pokémon, and on the other, a pseudo-legendary. Though Giovanni's resources played a part, it was clear that Beedrill had untapped potential. Cain's thoughts drifted to Mega Beedrill. With its adaptability ability, super high attack power, and lightning-fast speed, it was a true force to be reckoned with. Chapter 18. As young trainers embark on their journey through the magical world of Pokémon, many find themselves in search of the perfect starter companion. For those without connections to the prestigious Pokémon Association or the means to obtain one of the coveted Starter 3 Pokémon, the Beedrill presents an enticing option. This swift and tenacious creature can be easily caught and trained in a matter of weeks, making it a godsend for civilian trainers who make up the majority of the trainer population. With its rapid growth rate and combat prowess, the Beedrill is often the first choice for those without a trainer in their family. But for those with more exceptional means, the Beedrill may not be the most desirable companion. As one strives to become a master trainer like Giovanni, the pursuit of a pseudo-legendary Pokémon with greater potential may be more worthwhile. Cain, a trainer who had once hoped to raise a Beedrill, found that while it was possible to train one to average strength quickly, achieving greater strength proved to be a difficult task, and the Beedrill's short lifespan made it all the more challenging. Not everyone has the resources and determination like Giovanni to fully train a Beedrill to its full potential. But while Beedrill may not be the most powerful of Pokémon, it still has some worth as a transitional Pokémon, particularly with the possibility of Mega Evolution on the horizon. However, that was a matter for another time. As Cain and Murkrow found themselves facing a swarm of Beedrills, they knew they had to act fast. Utilizing his system, Cain scanned the approaching creatures, noting their nearly identical stats. Pokémon, Beedrill, Red. Gender, Male. Level, 14. Type, Bug plus Poison. Ability, Swarm. Held items, none. Egg moves, none. Basic moves, Twineedle, Fury Attack, Rage. Taunt moves, none. Technical machines, TMs none. Murkrow, Astonish. Cain shouted as the 5 beedrills descended upon them in a frenzy of rage. With a single command, Murkrow let loose a piercing caw, aimed directly at the attacking insects. The sound waves hit the beedrills with such force that 2 of them flinched, their trembling bodies revealing the terror they felt inside. As the other 3 beedrills charged forward, their massive needles glowing with a lavender light, indicating the use of Twineedle, Cain quickly shouted out more commands. Use Gust on those 3 beedrills in front of you, Murkrow. Finish them off first. With a fierce determination, Murkrow's wings trembled as he harnessed his flying-type energy, his mastery of Gust now allowing for a significantly faster release. A white whirlwind emerged with a flick of his wings, engulfing the 3 beedrills in an instant. The bug-type Pokémon, with a 2x weakness against flying types, were instantly propelled by the whirlwind and sent spinning through the air. Gust dealt significant damage to the beedrills, 2 of them collapsing on the ground, unable to fight any longer, while the last one hung on by a thread. As the 2 beedrills from earlier recovered from their flinch status, Cain couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Murkrow's green talent was evident, becoming more adept at controlling energy, resulting in the power of Gust getting stronger with each passing day. Use Peck to get rid of the remaining 1, then use Gust to finish the other 2. Cain commanded as Murkrow soared across the sky, leaving a trail of black light in his wake. The experienced bird was already well versed in maintaining tailwind and continued to do so, even without Cain's command. With a sharp bang, Murkrow's white beak radiated a soft glow as he pecked at the beedrill, who could not escape its fate and fell to the ground. Without hesitation, Murkrow flew towards the remaining 2 beedrills, who froze in place, fear still etched in their hearts. Gathering his flying-type energy at a faster pace than before, another white whirlwind erupted, immediately whistling as Murkrow flew towards the beedrills. Whoosh! The violent wind battered the beedrills mercilessly, as they dropped to the ground, unmoving. As Murkrow gracefully landed in front of Cain, it was clear that the battle was won, with not a single Kakuna or beedrill remaining in this section of the forest. The eerie silence was suddenly interrupted by the ominous buzz, buzz, buzz of numerous beedrills, emanating from all corners of the forest. The sheer sound was enough to send shivers down one's spine. The beedrills, united as they were, would drop everything and come immediately when one of their own was bullied. Cain knew that it was best to retreat, as the noise was much louder than before, and there were at least a few dozen of them. As the vast swarm of beedrills descended upon the scene, their anger was palpable as they surveyed the gruesome sight before them. Corpses of their fellow Kakunas and beedrills lay scattered about the ground, creating a chaotic and grisly scene. The beedrills flew around in frenzy, their rage directed at finding the perpetrator responsible for this massacre. Buzz! A sudden commanding voice cut through the chaos of the beedrill colony, as a scowling, huge beedrill emerged from the throngs. With a single command, the entire swarm fell silent, listening intently to the words of their leader. And, with its guidance, the beedrills disappeared into the forest in a perfectly orchestrated formation. Had Cain still been present, he would have been able to witness the true power of leadership embodied in this beedrill. This towering insect was not only larger than its counterparts, but also possessed a commanding presence that radiated authority. It was clear that the beedrill's size was a reflection of its status as the leader of the colony, rather than the cause of it. Meanwhile, Cain had retreated with Murkrow, returning to the Metapod territory. As they journeyed, Cain took out black bolt pokeblocks from his storage belt, feeding them to Murkrow, even though the bird had not sustained any damage and was not exhausted. For Cain, it was important that Murkrow stayed in peak form and was ready to face any crisis that may arise. Murkrow eagerly consumed the black bolt pokeblocks and as a result, traces of dark and flying-type energy intertwined in his body. Murkrow, being more proficient in using flying-type energy, was able to absorb the energy in the black bolt pokeblock more effectively. Additionally, he had a natural inclination towards dark-type energy. Thus, with every breath, Murkrow's body seamlessly absorbed energy that was invisible to the naked eye. The benefits of the pokeblock were becoming increasingly apparent. Unlike other Pokémon that took longer to recover after a battle, Murkrow was able to recover almost instantly. Are you prepared, Murkrow? Today's task is not easy, Cain asked softly, as he gently stroked Murkrow's silky smooth black feathers. Caw. Murkrow nodded, swinging his wings in a determined gesture, signaling his readiness. Chapter 19. Cain and Murkrow embarked on a daring mission deep within the forest. 4 hours on end, they prowled the underbrush, striking swiftly at Kakuna clusters and then slipping away into the shadows before the enemy could mount a counterattack. Their guerrilla tactics proved to be highly effective, and by the end of the afternoon, they had decimated no less than 4 Kakuna clusters. Though the experience gained from each Kakuna was pitifully small, The accumulation of these small victories allowed Murkrow to level up to level 14. But their success did not come without its challenges. For as they destroyed the Kakunas in certain sections of the forest, a few of them would evolve into fierce Beedrills in their rage. But Murkrow, battle-hardened and wise, had learned to anticipate such an evolution, and could now defeat Beedrills with ease. Cain also gathered data showing that the majority of Beedrills had a red aptitude, with only a small number displaying an orange aptitude. This served as a stark reminder of just how rare and valuable highly talented Pokémon are. The difference between a red aptitude and an orange aptitude Beedrill was clear. The latter possessed an additional egg move and demonstrated superior overall growth. In battle, an orange aptitude Beedrill could withstand 2 gust moves from Murkrow before succumbing, while a red aptitude Beedrill would fall after just 1. As the sun began to dip below the treetops, Cain and Murkrow retreated to the safety of the Metapod territory for a well-earned rest. But their mission was far from over, and as the day drew to a close, Cain turned to his companion and asked, "Are you still able to hang on?" Murkrow, silent but determined, nodded his assent. "Then we'll make a sweep before it gets dark," declared Cain, and with that, the 2 warriors set out once more into the heart of the Beedrill territory. As Cain and Murkrow ventured further, they encountered increasing resistance. The Kakuna clusters that had once been plentiful on the outskirts of the territory were now scarce, and the only way to find them was to delve deeper into the forest. But with each step they took, the Beedrills grew more numerous and more deadly. It took Cain nearly 20 minutes to stumble upon a Kakuna cluster teeming with life. As he surveyed the Kakunas hanging from the trees, he couldn't help but marvel at the Beedrill's reproductive prowess. If left unchecked, their ability to reproduce and grow at such a rapid pace could see them rule the entire Trial Island. But nature, as always, had a way of balancing the scales. There were some Pokémon that could not be defeated by sheer numbers alone. And so, as Murkrow prepared to unleash another gust attack upon the Kakunas, several Beedrills emerged from the surrounding area, their wings humming with fury. Cain frowned as he realized the implications of the Beedrill's sudden appearance. They had not come by chance but had been lying in wait, guarding the Kakuna cluster. This was not a few stragglers, but a concerted effort by the entire Beedrill swarm to defend their young. The sight of nearly 100 Beedrills and countless Kakuna offspring slaughtered in a single day had incensed them to the point of near genocide, and their anger now boiled over as they flew towards Cain and Murkrow, buzzing like a hornet's nest. As the Beedrills swarmed around him, Cain's face grew grave. It was clear that a formidable leader had emerged within the Beedrill swarm, one who knew how to use ambushes to deadly effect. It was as if he were facing a pack of wolves. A single wolf or even a pack of wolves would not be so terrifying, but it was the presence of a leader who could command and unite the pack that made them truly formidable. The Beedrills before him were no different, and their numbers continued to grow, slowly encircling him and Murkrow in a siege. "We can't go on like this," Cain thought to himself, his mind racing as he sought a way out. But the more dangerous the situation became, the calmer he became, and his habitual coolness of mind led him to devise a plan of escape. His AI system was always on, analyzing the situation around him. Murkrow, too, sensed the danger, and with a loud caw, he warned the Beedrills not to come any closer. As Cain slowly retreated with Murkrow, a vigorous buzzing could be heard from behind the Beedrill swarm. Suddenly, as if receiving some kind of command, all the Beedrills seemed to go berserk, their anger intensifying and their wings flapping like a raging wave. "Murkrow, use Gust at the front to block them as much as possible. Then, while we retreat, use Peck to take care of the few Beedrills behind you," Cain ordered coolly. Fortunately, the encirclement was not yet complete, and there were only a few Beedrills behind them. As long as they could quickly dispatch the Beedrills blocking their escape before the front line broke through the wind wall of Gust, they could still make it out safely. A split second later, 2 massive white whirlwinds appeared in front of the Beedrills, blocking their path forward. Even if 1 or 2 Beedrills tried to break through the whirlwinds, they were caught up in them in an instant and became incapacitated. Without looking back, Cain wiped his hand on the storage belt around his waist, and a piece of brownish-yellow cloth appeared. He casually tied it around his head, revealing only his 2 eyes, and then dashed straight into the dense forest. Cain ignored the 2 Beedrills that charged at him. He was confident that Murkrow would be able to get rid of the 2 remaining blockers in time after using Gust. With a flash of black light, Murkrow's Peck attack knocked the 2 low-level Beedrills away, leaving them motionless on the ground. Peck is also a flying-type move, so it dealt a lot of damage to the Beedrills. After easily dispatching them, Murkrow appeared above Cain, ready to escort him away. Suddenly, amid the whirlwind that blocked the path of all the Beedrills, a huge figure appeared, steady amid Gust's attack. With a roar, a long sharp needle pierced through the whirlwind, causing it to directly dissipate. It was only then that the figure was revealed to be a beedrill that was twice the size of the average beedrill. When Cain heard the activity, he looked back from the corner of his eye, and his pupils contracted. It was the beedrill swarm's leader. The system couldn't scan the data because Cain was too far away, but judging by the aura alone, it was no weaker than the pincer that had been defeated before. It might have felt even stronger. But now was not the time to fight. Even if it is special, Cain's footsteps would not stop. Instead, he accelerated, leading Murkrow in a hasty retreat, using Gus to block the way a few more times before gradually shaking off the swarm of beedrills. After a grueling half-hour battle, Cain, breathing heavily, was able to rest at last under a tree deep in metapod territory. It was only because of proper nutrition, combined with the breathing techniques he had learned in his previous life while training his body, that he was able to hold on after such an intense pursuit. As his breathing gradually calmed down, Cain couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He thought about the sheer number of beedrills he had seen while escaping. He had originally thought that even if there were more of them, they would all be newly evolved and easily restrained by flying-type moves. He had believed that as long as he controlled his pace, he could devour the entire territory step by step, making it the perfect training ground for Murkrow. But he never could have predicted that an intelligent leader, capable of coordinating the entire situation, would have quickly emerged within the swarm, causing a significant problem for Cain. Whether or not a group has a leader makes a significant difference in the group's fighting power and cohesiveness. A group with a qualified leader can unite a dispersed group of people, much like a clenched fist that delivers a powerful punch to the enemy. The appearance of the beedrill leader put Cain in a difficult spot. But it would be a shame to give up so easily. It was too late for Cain to scan the leader's stats as he fled, but to become the leader of a group so early on and without controversy, the leader couldn't have had low talent or strength. Chapter 20. Murkrow, the proud and powerful bird, found no pleasure in vanquishing weak opponents. He knew his duty was to follow the commands of his trainer, Cain, but it was not until the arrival of the beedrill leader that he truly felt the thrill of battle. Cain watched on with a smile, stroking the smooth feathers of his companion. "You are quite the warrior, Murkrow," he said. The bird let out a fierce caw, as if to say that the only way to truly respect power is to defeat it with one's own strength. The beedrill colony was now curled up like a hedgehog, making it difficult to attack. Nevertheless, they would have to wait until morning to deal with the beedrills. Back at their camp on top of the familiar hill, Cain built a fire and, as was customary, gave Murkrow a full body massage. "Murkrow," Cain said, "your strength is still lacking if you wish to fight the beedrill leader. We must ramp up your training. Are you up for the task?" The bird nodded solemnly, indicating that he was willing to endure any hardship in the pursuit of strength. "Very well," Cain said with a slight smile. "Let us begin our after-dinner workout." With that, Cain picked up 2 pieces of wood weighing 2.5 kilograms and tied them to Murkrow's wings with a pre-made rope. The bird felt a heavy weight as he flapped his wings, struggling to lift off the ground. But with each flap, he adjusted to the new stress and flew higher, pushing himself to new limits under the guidance of his trainer. "You know the drill, Murkrow," Cain said, nodding at the large tree before them. Its branches and leaves spread out wide, making it a formidable obstacle to fly around. 100 laps, my friend." The bird took off, circling the tree with precision, not stopping for a moment. As the night fell, Cain and Murkrow, having completed their training, slowly drifted off to sleep. 5 days had passed since their last trial test, and another was set to take place in 2 days' time. Whether they could solve the beedrill problem or not, they would have to return to the base after the next day. Hidden in a bush, Cain was covered in leaves and grass, his head wrapped in a ragged cloth and his face heavily oiled. Only his eyes were visible, peeking out from the undergrowth. The smell of tree sap clung to him, making it difficult to spot him among the foliage. This was a simple camouflage technique, one he had mastered as a member of Team Rocket. The beedrills flew overhead, their yellow bodies and red eyes a blur. Cain knew that his presence had a significant impact on Murkrow's ability to battle freely. If it weren't for protecting Cain, the beedrills would never have been able to keep up with Murkrow's speed. So Cain simply hid in one place and waited for Murkrow to lead all the beedrills away. He waited for 10 minutes until a jet black bird Pokémon landed next to the bush and called softly. "Caw," Murkrow cawed as it returned to Cain's side, having successfully led the swarm of beedrills on a wild goose chase. Following Cain's orders, Murkrow had maintained a steady pace that allowed the beedrills to keep up, but not to attack. Once safely away from Cain's position, Murkrow had used Tailwind to fly at full speed and shake off the pursuit. Cain emerged from his hiding spot, patting the dirt from his clothes and stamping his feet to restore feeling. He fed Murkrow a black bolt poke block to replenish his stamina and nodded in satisfaction, a hint of a smile on his lips. With the beedrills safely lured away, it was time to properly scout the central part of their territory. Cain and Murkrow made their way through the dense woods, the only sounds coming from the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The trees were stripped of their leaves, the ground littered with nibbled bits, and threads tangled in the branches, evidence of the presence of weedles. The scent of fresh leaves hung in the air as Cain and Murkrow pressed on. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the heart of the territory, a massive old tree, nearly 3 times the size of the one Cain usually lived in, with a bird's nest-like structure on top made entirely of clay. Cain stood at the edge of the massive hive, staring in disbelief at the scene before him. The hive was filled with Pokémon eggs. If they all hatched successfully, there would be a massive number of Weedles, which would eventually evolve into a swarm of beedrills. Despite their short lifespan, these bug-type Pokémon had a reproductive rate that was unrivaled by other Pokémon. Cain, taken aback, activated his system and began scanning all the eggs. The data flickered before his eyes, mostly red aptitude Pokémon eggs with a few orange ones thrown in. After a few moments, all of the data had been scanned, yielding a total of over 500 beedrill eggs, with only 3 of them at the yellow aptitude level and 25 at the orange. Cain took a deep breath, unsure of what to do with these eggs. Destroying them had no meaning or value to him. Murkrow, who had been standing beside him, suddenly patted Cain's leg, drawing his attention to a branch higher up. Looking in the direction Murkrow indicated, Cain noticed a smaller hive at the top of the tree, more delicate and detailed in terms of craftsmanship. Murkrow led him to the hive higher up. This must be the nest of the beedrill leader, Cain thought as he looked at the 3 Pokémon eggs in the hive. When he reactivated the system, he was astounded by the results of the scan. 2 of the 3 Pokémon eggs had a yellow aptitude, and 1 had a green aptitude. Pokémon, Weedle, egg form, green. Gender, female. Level, 1. Type, bug plus poison. Ability, unknown. Held items, none. Egg moves, bug bite, focus energy. Basic moves, none. Taught moves, none. Technical machines, TMs none. Although this Pokémon was only a common Weedle, when a Pokémon's talent reaches the green level, the species restriction becomes much less limiting. This was the beedrill leader's child, and based on the aptitude of these 3 eggs, the beedrill leader's talent must have reached the yellow level, if not the green. In general, if there are no special circumstances in a Pokémon's genetics, their children's talent will be within 1 level of their parents' talent. In other words, if the parents have a yellow aptitude, their children will at worst have an orange aptitude, most likely a yellow aptitude, and possibly a green aptitude. There will be a variety of situations if the parents have different aptitudes, but the minimum will only be 1 rank lower than the parent with the lowest talent, and the maximum will be 1 rank higher than the parent with the highest talent. With a piece of cloth, Cain wrapped the green aptitude Weedle egg, tied it securely to his back, and jumped a few times to make sure it wouldn't fall. Pokémon eggs cannot be placed in the storage belt, otherwise, the egg will become dormant and die. Storage spaces are typically used for non-living things. Placing a living thing in one would cause it to perish. Cain was determined to keep this green aptitude Pokémon egg. He could keep it for himself or sell it to Team Rocket to get what he needed. As a Pokémon hunter, Cain was no stranger to this type of thing. Chapter 21. Cain knew that this 1 green aptitude Pokémon egg would bring him a bountiful profit. He had set his sights on the 2 yellow aptitude Pokémon eggs as well, for their parents were known to be gifted. Though they may not have been as rare as the green aptitude Pokémon, they were still sought after. The difference between having parents with yellow aptitudes and parents with green aptitudes was significant, but Cain knew better than to force the matter. The value of a yellow aptitude Pokémon versus a green aptitude Pokémon was immeasurable. With the help of his trusty Murkrow, Cain carefully made his way back to the ground with the precious egg nestled on his back. It was imperative that they flee this dangerous location before the beedrill swarm returned. To avoid a confrontation, Cain and Murkrow took a different route back to safety. As Cain departed the beedrill hive with his prize, the beedrill leader felt a pang of loss. The leader remembered the 3 Pokémon eggs still left in the hive and let out a furious scream. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The surrounding beedrills were so frightened that they did not dare to breathe. The leader flew as fast as it could back to the hive, but Cain had already made his escape and was safely back in the Metapod's territory, far away from the beedrill swarm that was frantically chasing after the beedrill leader. Cain had initially intended to destroy the beedrill's hives, knowing that the homeless beedrills would undoubtedly be in a frenzy searching for their enemies and rebuilding their hives, allowing Cain and Murkrow to take advantage of the situation and slip away unnoticed. However, upon discovering the green aptitude Pokémon egg within the hive, he deemed it a worthy trade-off to revise his strategy. But Cain had not anticipated the gravity of his actions in stealing the Pokémon egg. The Beedrill leader returned to the hive with haste, leaving the other Beedrills trailing behind. The sight of its nest, stripped of one of its 3 precious Pokémon eggs, sent a wave of fury through the leader. Its eyes, already red with anger, now held a hint of madness and a thirst for revenge. As the leader of the colony, its talent had the power to elevate the entire colony, but the theft of its most gifted offspring was like snuffing out the colony's very future. The forest echoed with the sounds of the Beedrill's rage. Buzz, buzz! In the mind of the Beedrill leader, the image of the black-colored Pokémon and the human beside it came to mind. Its intuition as a parent led it to suspect they were responsible for the abduction of its child. The leader's rage intensified as it caught the scent of the stolen Pokémon egg in the air, and all the Beedrills looked to their leader, ready to obey its command. The Beedrill leader flew out of the hive, its wings vibrating frantically as it followed the trail. The Beedrills followed suit, and the entire forest shook as they poured out of the hive. Other Pokémon, sensing the danger, quickly moved out of the way, not daring to impede the frenzy of the Beedrills. The Beedrills eventually reached the Metapod's territory and came to a halt. It was a well-known fact that the Butterfree colony and the Beedrill colony were bitter rivals on the island. The Butterfree, known for their gentle nature, did not typically initiate attacks, and the Beedrills, while aggressive, usually avoided provoking them, as the Butterfree colony was just as prolific in reproducing as they were. But when the furious Beedrills flew towards their territory, the Butterfrees, sensing danger, converged, and for the first time the 2 colonies met at the border of their territories. Buzz! Buzz off! The Beedrill leader, consumed with the need to find its stolen offspring, paid no heed to the presence of the Butterfrees as the scent of its child was clearly coming from their territory. Ignoring the pleas of the Butterfree leader, the Beedrill leader shouted and charged forward into the Butterfree's territory. The Butterfree leader tried to stop it but was met with 2 other Beedrills attacking from the side. The Butterfrees, caught off guard and outnumbered, were no match for the enraged Beedrills who fought fiercely. Uhree! The Butterfree leader cried out in vain as the Beedrill leader flew deeper into their territory. Meanwhile, Cain and Murkrow were resting at their campsite, the stolen Pokémon egg wrapped tightly in leaves to hide its scent, while Murkrow enjoyed his favorite Pokeblocks. Cain, a quasi-elite trainer in his previous life, had a certain status in Team Rocket and no longer needed to personally catch Pokémon for resources, and had forgotten that Pokémon have a special bond with their offspring. He had failed to take the necessary precautions to conceal the scent of the Pokémon egg, and now, even if he had acted, it was already too late. He was unaware that his actions had directly led to a battle between the 2 colonies. Caw! Murkrow, who had been peacefully eating, suddenly raised his head, his instincts warning him of impending danger. Cain sat up slowly, studying Murkrow with confusion. Murkrow, what's wrong? As he spoke, a buzzing sound reached his ears and his expression shifted as he looked towards the north. A yellow figure gradually emerged from the horizon, followed by a dozen smaller but similar figures. Beedrill! Cain recognized the familiar figures, having dealt with them for the past 2 days, and knew exactly who this individual was. I didn't expect them to track me all the way here. It seems I've truly ruffled their feathers. Murkrow was thrilled at the appearance of the Beedrill leader, having longed for a chance to fight it. As for the dozen ordinary Beedrills, they were of little concern to him. Cain smiled. It seemed the entire Beedrill colony had paid a heavy price to reach him here. The Beedrill leader caught sight of the 2 familiar figures, and its suspicions were confirmed as it rushed towards them without hesitation. Murkrow, get ready for battle, Cain said softly as he watched the approaching figures. Use Tailwind right away, and when you reach them use Gust to hold off the Beedrill leader while taking out the other injured Beedrills with Astonish and Peck. After that, you can finally have your much-anticipated fight with the Beedrill leader. Faced with a surprise attack from a dozen Beedrills, Cain issued the most suitable commands for the current situation. In an instant, Murkrow transformed into a black blur, surrounded by swirling currents of air, increasing his speed even further. Without hesitation, Murkrow aimed for the Beedrill leader while unleashing Gust, creating a wall of wind that blocked its path. Thanks to his rigorous training, Murkrow was faster than ever, and he quickly used successive pecks to knock several of the already injured Beedrills to the ground. The Beedrill leader quickly broke through the Gust barrier, with 6 Beedrills still in good condition. The remaining Beedrills charged forward, using their Twineedle and Fury attack moves in succession. Murkrow, using his nimble body, did his best to evade but was still hit by the attacks of 2 Beedrills. As the battlefield moved closer uphill, Cain finally had the opportunity to scan the information of the Beedrill leader. Pokémon, Beedrill, leader, light green, gender, female, level, 17, type, bug plus poison, ability, swarm, leadership, can raise a Pokémon's talent by a small order. Held items. None. Egg moves. Bug bite. Pin missile. Basic moves. Twine needle. Fury attack. Rage. Pursuit. Taught moves. Drill run. Quick attack. Technical machines. TMs none. The leadership ability, which is exclusive to leader Pokémon, can enhance a Pokémon's talent and earn the trust of their kind. Chapter 22. Cain was shocked as he laid eyes on the Beedrill leader's data. He had harbored his suspicions about the leader's circumstances initially, but the revelation of its ability took him by surprise. Even in his previous life, after years spent as a Pokémon hunter, he had only encountered the leadership ability twice. Such an ability could elevate a Pokémon's innate talents by one small order, and it was a truly rare and extraordinary occurrence. In the world of Pokémon, talents were divided into 7 ranks: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and black. However, within each rank, there were also 3 subclasses based on the depth of the color. For instance, the leader's talent was a light green, approaching the green level, and the difference between that and a dark green aptitude was vast. Murkrow's talent, meanwhile, was green but of a darker shade, almost reaching the level of dark green. It was unlikely, however, that it would ever reach that level without the use of special methods or items. The Beedrill leader's original talent should have been dark yellow, but it had been upgraded to light green due to its ability. As its offspring, the Weedle egg with green aptitude was the most highly talented existence in the entire colony, and if properly trained, it would become the strongest member of the colony. The existence of this Pokémon would also improve the talent of the entire colony as a whole. It was no surprise that the Beedrill leader was livid upon discovering that its most exceptional child had gone missing, and it explained why the entire colony was outraged when they learned that the Weedle egg had vanished. Cain's actions had damaged the very foundation of the colony, and the repercussions were far more severe than the direct extermination of the Kakunas. Of course, these thoughts were fleeting. After felling the otherwise injured Beedrills, Murkrow sustained a few hits of his own, which were not particularly severe but still put him in danger. Caw! Murkrow let out a piercing screech, his shrill cries sending 2 of the surrounding Beedrills into a daze. As they were momentarily stunned, the flying-type energy between Murkrow's wings quickly coalesced, and with a flick of his wings, he unleashed Gust. The swirling wind enveloped both Murkrow and the nearby Beedrills. Murkrow's wings continued to flap, amplifying the damage of Gust and blocking the Beedrill leader from attacking. As the power of the move increased, the Beedrills who had been desperately fighting were one by one thrown out and fell to the ground, motionless. Bang! Murkrow stopped only when the last Beedrill fell, unable to continue battling. At the same time, the fierce whirlwind caused by Gust also dissipated, the spinning airflow making a muffled sound as it dissipated into the air. Only the Beedrill leader and Murkrow remained in the air, facing each other. The Beedrill leader was the first to attack, using quick attack and transforming into a white flash of light, its double needles raised as it followed up with Twine Needle. Use Peck, Murkrow, Cain commanded, and Murkrow's eyes narrowed as white light shone on his beak. While keeping Tailwind activated, Murkrow collided with the oncoming Beedrill. Boom! The 2 Pokémon collided in an instant, flying backwards from the force of their attacks. A wave of fire appeared, twisting around Beedrill's body as it used Rage. This move deals damage, and if the user is hit by a direct attack, it raises the user's attack by 1 stage. Cain was unfazed by Beedrill's use of Rage. As long as Murkrow could maintain a safe distance, he would have the upper hand at all times. Keep Tailwind activated and use Gust, Murkrow, he spoke calmly. With the recent collision, the 2 Pokémon were once again separated. Gust formed almost instantly, slamming into the Beedrill. The whirlwind that kept blocking its path was a flying-type move, which greatly annoyed the Beedrill. Carrying the momentum of Rage, it charged directly at Murkrow, ignoring the whirlwind in front of it. Simultaneously using both Twine Needle and Fury Attack, it broke through the whirlwind. Murkrow froze for a moment as he stared at the Beedrill that was forcibly charging through his attacks. As he was dazed, Beedrill suddenly appeared in front of him, using Quick Attack. Murkrow, stay alert, use Astonish, Cain commanded. The ferocious Twine Needle strikes inflicted a wave of intense pain on Murkrow. Enduring the damage caused by the sharp attack, Murkrow shouted and used Astonish to interrupt the Beedrill's fierce momentum. Murkrow once again opened up the distance with a dodge. The battle continued like this for a while, with Murkrow using Gust to keep the Beedrill at bay, and the Beedrill quickly breaking through Gust and approaching Murkrow to strike with Twine Needle. After going back and forth 7 or 8 times, Murkrow's body was a little numb, and his wings felt heavy. The Beedrill also dragged its body, gasping for air. With its light green aptitude and powerful physique as a leader Pokémon, it was capable of repeatedly enduring the super-effective Gust move and still not losing battle power, showing how strong a Pokémon it is. Even though the Beedrill is 3 levels higher than Murkrow, it was being restrained, 2x weakness, as a bug type fighting against the faster flying type Murkrow. Murkrow, use Roost. Cain, who had been watching the entire battle and was in command at all times, continued to instruct. As both sides began to slow down, the one who could hold out the longest would come out on top. It had to be said that the Beedrill leader's strength was truly outstanding, deserving of being the leader Pokémon that had consumed an entire colony's worth of resources to grow up. Murkrow landed on the ground at Cain's command, his numb body causing him to stagger and almost lose his footing. The effects of Roost were immediately activated, and the majestic power of the earth was transmitted continuously through Murkrow's feet to his entire body. A warm sensation appeared, and his paralyzed body gradually regained feeling. The Beedrill, though confused as to why its opponent had suddenly fallen to the ground, sensed Murkrow's recovering state and knew it needed to act quickly. Though its intentions were sound, its own condition had worsened, and it lacked the speed and stamina to even use quick attack. Murkrow awoke from his roost state and opened his eyes, which shone with fierce fighting spirit as the Beedrill approached. Despite being rivals, Murkrow felt a sense of respect for the Beedrill. Cain, understanding Murkrow's character, saw the look in his eyes and shook his head with a bitter smile. "Murkrow, do as you wish," he said. "Caw!" Murkrow screamed as he collided with the Beedrill, his wings shaking. There was no dodging for Murkrow this time, and the Beedrill's state prevented it from freely controlling its body. It was a direct fist-to-fist fight. The sound of bodies colliding in the air occurred one after the other. The Beedrill's body gradually weakened, the anger in its eyes fading and instead revealing admiration for a worthy opponent. Murkrow's wings slammed into the Beedrill's body, but the expected counterblow did not arrive, and the Beedrill was finally knocked to the ground and lost consciousness. Murkrow stared blankly at the fallen Beedrill, his body trembling with excitement. "Caw! Caw!" he exclaimed, thrilled by the intensity of the battle. Cain walked over slowly, looking at the Beedrill that lay unconscious on the ground, and let out a long sigh of relief. Although he had confidence in Murkrow, he couldn't help but feel a sense of worry. It was only when his opponent was actually lying on the ground that he could finally relax. A white light suddenly flashed on Murkrow's body, catching Cain by surprise. He laughed, not expecting Murkrow to have gone up another level after defeating the Beedrill. The system moved with his thoughts, scanning Murkrow. Pokémon. Murkrow. Green. Gender. Male. Level. 15. Type. Dark plus flying. Ability. Prankster. Held items. None. Egg moves. Punishment. Feint attack. Roost. Basic moves. Peck. Astonish. Pursuit. Haze. Wing attack. Taunt moves. Snatch. Tailwind. Gust. Technical machines. TMs none. Murkrow had progressed to level 15 and learned Wing attack, a powerful flying type move that would now be one of his most formidable weapons. But as the exhilaration of victory subsided, Murkrow stumbled as the after effects of using Roost set in. His body barely had any strength left, and after the intense battle and direct clashes, Murkrow had reached his limit. Cain quickly caught the falling Murkrow, laughing helplessly as he gave him a light tap on the head with his hand. "Now you know the consequences of messing around," he said, his words tinged with both helplessness and adoration. Despite the fact that Murkrow was reduced to his current state, he had defeated a formidable foe, and Cain was pleased. He knew that Murkrow had grown stronger from this battle, not just in power but also in character. Chapter 23. As he carefully placed Murkrow on the ground, Cain reached for his potion of healing. He sprayed it tenderly over the dark bird's wounds, one by one, a cool sensation spreading over the injuries before the disinfectant kicked in, causing a burst of pain. Murkrow let out a hiss, unsure if it was one of comfort or irritation as the potion flowed freely, emptying the bottle completely. Gradually, the bird felt his strength returning and, after a helping of nourishing pokeblocks, he rose to his feet once more. Cain firmly held Murkrow back, not allowing him to take flight just yet. He picked him up, feeling the weight of the injured creature in his arms as he made his way towards the border of the Butterfree and Beedrill territory. The air was thick with tragedy as they approached. Beedrills and Butterfrees lay dead, scattered across the ground and amidst the trees and bushes. The Beedrill swarm had begun with an advantage in numbers, but as more and more Butterfrees returned from their various locations to join the fray, the tide began to turn. With the Butterfree leader still standing and the Beedrill leader nowhere to be found, the Beedrill's fate seemed sealed. The normally docile Butterfrees had become filled with rage at the sight of their fallen comrades and refused to back down, resulting in even more injuries and deaths. And as Murkrow defeated the Beedrill leader, something shifted within the Beedrills. The state of blessedness they had felt was suddenly gone, leaving them stunned and confused. They let out a deafening roar, completely oblivious of the situation around them, as they sensed the loss of their leader. When a king falls, his subjects are left in shambles, and such was the case with the Beedrills. They charged forward recklessly, hoping to break through the Butterfree defenses, but it was to no avail. More and more of them fell into madness, but a few of the stronger Beedrills called out to their comrades, jolting them out of their frenzied state. Their hearts were heavy, but a glimmer of hope returned to their eyes as they retreated, led by a few of their own. The Beedrills had come with a vengeance, but now they returned with less than 100 survivors. Had anyone been paying attention, they would have noticed an enigmatic aura gradually enveloping one Beedrill in particular, the one guiding the rest of its kin to safety. This enigmatic aura was the prototype of a leader's aura, which appears when all the members of a group are united and have strong cohesion. When the aura condenses to a certain level, it transforms completely into the leadership ability. The Butterfrees also returned, their wings heavy with the weight of the remains of their fallen comrades, and thus ended the tragic battle between the two colonies. It took Murkrow more than 3 hours to recover from the effects of Roost, even with the aid of Pokeblocks, and he continued to rest his body at Cain's request. By the time the sun rose again, Murkrow was fully recovered. Cain prepared breakfast under the tree, while the enthusiastic Murkrow, with 2 logs tied to his wings, soared through the sky, circling the great tree several times. Cain and Murkrow both realized how fragile their bodies were during yesterday's final battle with the Beedrill leader. So after learning Wing Attack, Murkrow tried to develop his wings even more. Murkrow's body felt a bit stronger after leveling up. He used to get tired after flying 100 rounds, but today he had enough energy to fly another 100. Murkrow resumed his training after taking a short break and consuming some Pokeblocks prepared by Cain. After untying the wood from his wings, he stood on the ground and began pounding them against the great tree. Cain joined in the training after eating his breakfast, first running a few laps around the hill, then doing sit-ups and push-ups. After a morning of training, a man and his Pokémon lay exhausted on their backs, looking up at the blue sky and feeling both physically and mentally relaxed. Since it was already the 6th day, Cain and Murkrow began their journey back to Team Rocket's base after their lunch break. As Cain crossed the border between the territories of the Butterfree and the Beedrill, he felt a sense of horror wash over him. He never could have imagined that his actions would have led to such a devastating war between the two colonies, leaving the forest in ruins and Beedrill corpses littering the ground. The devastation was palpable, and it was clear that both sides had suffered heavy losses in the conflict. As he walked through the Butterfree territory, Cain couldn't help but notice the absence of the metapods that had once been a common sight, as well as the lack of Butterfrees fluttering about. It was a somber reminder of the cruel nature of this world, where strength is the only currency and compassion is a luxury few can afford. Cain had long ago given up on such sentimentality, choosing instead to show kindness only to those he considered true friends and his Pokémon. When they reached the Beedrill territory, the familiarity was still there, but the once lively forest now seemed empty and desolate, with no Kakunas to be seen in the trees. "I hope you have the foresight not to bother me," Cain muttered under his breath. Given the state of the Beedrill colony, Cain held no illusions about their current state. Without their leader, the Beedrills were nothing more than a loose pile of sand for Murkrow to knock down one by one. The forest that had once been a perilous crossing was now easily traversed by Cain and Murkrow without incident, not a single Beedrill to be encountered on the entire journey, as if they had all gone into hiding. As they journeyed on, signs of Pokémon began to appear again. The way back was almost identical to the one they had taken, and as they passed the spot where they had fought the treasure-hunting trio, the original signs of the battle were almost non-existent, with only a few bloodstains visible on the ground. As Cain passed by the Zubat cave, he carefully stowed away all the items he had left within its depths into his storage belt. He had set out for a quick excursion but had ended up staying several days longer than he had intended. Though the cave was located on the border between the periphery and the heart of the forest, the level of Pokémon in the area was so low that it could no longer meet Murkrow's needs. Though there were no signs of Pokémon activity within the cave, there were footprints outside, leading Cain to believe that the Pokémon were likely deterred by the presence of the Zubats who had once called the cave home. Otherwise, the berries he had stored in the cave would have been taken. He knew that in a few days' time, the hesitant Pokémon would be tempted to explore the Zubat cave, and it wouldn't be long before the area became the territory of another Pokémon. With their belongings sorted and packed, Cain and Murkrow set off without a backward glance at the cave. It was just another stop on their journey, one that wouldn't leave a lasting impression or be missed. Like Purgatory Island, it was a temporary pit stop, perhaps an important one, but certainly not the most significant. The fact that Team Rocket had been able to gather so many children on this hidden island and conduct their so-called trials was a testament to the island's treacherous nature. Though none of the Pokémon on the island were particularly powerful, their talents were generally higher than those found elsewhere. Outside, one might encounter a Pokémon with a green aptitude only once in every 10,000 Pokémon encountered. But here on the island, Cain had already encountered 2 green aptitude Pokémon in just one Beedrill colony. Even the yellow and orange aptitude Pokémon were more commonplace. And this was likely just one of the many hidden islands under Team Rocket's control. As his thoughts drifted, Cain returned to Team Rocket's base before sunset, with Murkrow by his side. The base before him appeared like a large, cannibalistic mouth, ready to devour anyone who entered, and Cain's grip on the Weedle egg tightened. He knew that the secrets of this island were not meant for the likes of him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to discover. Chapter 24. As Cain passed through the entrance of the base, the view before him gradually opened up, revealing a scene not so dissimilar to the one he had left behind. The crowd had thinned, and a feeling of emptiness hung in the air. No doubt, thought Cain, many of those who had left had not yet returned, for the trial test was to take place on the morrow. His own return had been prompted by the need to dispose of a Weedle egg, but as he took in his surroundings, Cain couldn't shake the feeling that the base was less a sanctuary, and more a prison. The coldness that permeated the air seemed to seep into one's very soul, causing hearts and minds to harden and, if one were to linger too long, even drive one to madness. In a corner of the square, a teenage trainer busied himself with his Pokémon, and upon catching sight of Cain, a look of joy spread across his face before he vanished from sight. Cain took note of the boy but paid him little mind as he made his way towards the exchange center. As he walked, he could feel eyes upon him, some filled with doubt, others indifference, and still others with a hint of malice. And then, as he entered the trialist's special housing area, he came upon a house that stood out from the rest. Inside, in the center of a hall, a young man sat, a sly smile on his lips as he stroked the scales of an Ekans that coiled around him. On either side of him sat some 8 people, each with their Pokémon, all of them too afraid to meet the young man's gaze. Boss Xander, that kid is back," a voice called out, as a figure rushed through the doorway. But as the words were spoken, the speaker's voice faltered and the 1,000 words he had intended to say died on his lips. For the young man sitting in the center of the hall was none other than Xander, the first-place winner of the first test, and, if the original timeline held true, the undisputed champion of the entire trial. That kid who ranked second. Xander's smile vanished as he sat up straight, his eyes becoming as sharp as knives as he fixed his gaze upon the newcomer. The Ekans that had been coiled peacefully beside Xander's chair straightened as well, sensing the killing intent emanating from its trainer. Its long, narrow eyes now filled with an ominous aura, sending a shiver down the spine of the teenager who had come to report the news. Yes, he stammered, nodding stiffly. Xander, however, seemed to relax upon hearing the affirmative answer, leaning back in his chair once more. But the Ekans beneath him remained tense, and the teenager couldn't shake the feeling that he had only narrowly avoided a terrible fate. As expected from the person I'm interested in, Xander said, a cold smile on his lips. He stayed outside for that long and came back safe and sound. Haha. One of the 8 seated men, a strong teenager of about 17 or 18, suddenly stood up. Boss Xander, he rasped. It's just a kid who used a trick to get second place. Let me go and bring him to you. And with that, he turned to leave. But Xander stopped him with a wave of his hand. Rockwell, no need for that. I still want to see how he does tomorrow. The smile on his face belied the cold calculation in his eyes. Yes, Rockwell replied, his voice still raspy, and sat back down. On the surface, he seemed like a simple man, but in his heart, he was cunning and ruthless. For in a place like this, where survival was key, strength was important, but even more crucial was the ability to be ruthless. And Xander had achieved this by defeating those who opposed him, killing their Pokémon, and making them watch as their beloved creatures were devoured by his Ekans. This brutal act, along with his strength, had quickly attracted a loyal following. In this savage land, only the strongest will survive. The weak will inevitably be cast aside, and the only way to endure is to cling to those who hold power and become their servant. So long as one remains among the elite ranks, a chance to survive may yet be had. This is the privilege bestowed upon the mighty by the hand of Team Rocket. This trial serves to bring new talent to Team Rocket, and those who endure shall be granted important positions within its various posts. For those who survive, the possibility to rise to great heights, to become a powerful trainer, supported by the might of Team Rocket, may yet be within reach. For those born into the association, a path of growth awaits, and even if they do not become powerful, they may still live a life of respect as a Pokémon trainer, without want for food or shelter. But for those born into poverty, This trial may be their only hope. Most of those brought to this island are commoners, those who could not even afford a meal, like Cain, who grew up in the slums, scavenging for scraps. But there are also those, like Xander, born into privilege, who came to the island not to hone their skills, but to flaunt their talents. Xander's brother, a senior officer in Team Rocket, was one who stood out on the trial island, and Xander felt that he was no less talented. Using his brother's connections, he was able to secure a place on the island, and even obtained his green aptitude Eakins through underhanded means. As the unevolved form of Xander's brother's signature Pokémon, Arbok, Xander was already familiar with its training, and believed his Eakins had reached the peak of its abilities for its level. Thus far, all had proceeded without incident. Like his brother before him, Xander was a man prone to temper, and through the use of cruel methods, he had amassed a loyal following, who assisted him in providing resources for his Pokémon, aiding in its training. And as for who would be left behind and who would be taken with him after the final trial, that decision was entirely at the mercy of his whims. Seated at the head of the table, Xander lounged in his wide chair, his cold eyes scanning the room, taking note of the more powerful among his subordinates. Those who had proven themselves, he would consider taking with him to form his own squad within Team Rocket. For the ambitious Xander, being a mere foot soldier would not suffice, and as he participated in this trial, he aimed to be the best. His smallest goal was to surpass his brother, and the first step to achieving that was becoming a Team Rocket executive. If he were to reach that rank, he would be at the top of Team Rocket, and with his talent, he might even ascend further. At the thought of his future path, a twisted smile would spread across Xander's lips as he licked them in excitement. Cain, as he walked straight towards the exchange center, was unaware of these machinations, and even if he had been, he would not have given them a second thought. His only goal was to become stronger, and anyone who stood in his way would be crushed. As for Xander's true identity, Cain had not been able to uncover it in his previous life, and did not possess the strength to do so now. And even if he had, he would not have cared, for with the system already activated, he believed he could overcome any obstacle. Undoing the cloth that bound the Weedle egg, he carefully placed it on the counter, drawing the startled gaze of the Team Rocket employee. For this Pokémon egg, Cain had made the decision to exchange it for Team Rocket points. Though the Pokémon that would hatch from it would not be weak, and as a bug type, it would grow quickly and become a formidable force in battle, Cain had still chosen to part with it. For as an egg, there was no telling when it would hatch, and if it did so at the end of the trial, it would be of no use to Cain. Even if it were to hatch in the coming days, Cain could easily raise it, but only one Pokémon could be used in the final battle of the trial, and so not only would it not aid Cain, but it would also require resources to raise, becoming a burden. Most importantly, the lifespan of its final evolutionary form, Beedrill, was too short. By the time Cain had trained it to become a valuable fighting force, its body would begin to deteriorate. And as for Beedrill's Mega Evolution, it was important to remember that even the Association was unaware of Mega Evolution at this time, and precious Megastones were not something that could be obtained easily. Even if one were to be obtained by chance, the likelihood of it being the Beedrill's Megastone was slim. With these thoughts in mind, Cain had decided to exchange the Beedrill's egg for points, gaining important resources and allowing him to focus on training his Murkrow. Ignoring the staff member's astonished look, he said blandly, "I'll exchange it for points." Chapter 25. Are you sure? The employee inquired, a hint of skepticism etched onto his face as he gazed upon Cain as if he were a mere fool. Cain merely nodded, remaining tight-lipped. Though Pokémon eggs were not an everyday occurrence in the wild, they were not an impossibility to come across. Yet, why did many choose to overlook them, instead of bringing them back to exchange for Team Rocket points? The answer lay in the uncertainty of a wild Pokémon egg's potential. Only upon hatching could one truly determine the talent of the creature within. The Association's esteemed scientists had long since devised portable devices to measure a Pokémon's talents, yet they came at a steep price. To use such a device, one must first capture the Pokémon, disregarding the fact that such an extravagant instrument was not something the common folk could afford. But the technology to judge the talent of a Pokémon egg was not yet advanced enough to be easily portable, and it required a vast amount of resources to operate. Only those with the assurance that the egg's parents were of exceptional talent would even consider delving into the egg's potential. What if the egg possessed the yellow talent? Would someone with access to such a device even spare a glance at a yellow aptitude Pokémon? Thus, when Cain declared his intention to exchange this Pokémon egg for points, the employee regarded him with a look of absurdity. Cain had no desire to elaborate, for how could he reveal that he already knew the egg had a green talent? Such knowledge would even alarm the chief instructor, Viper. Have you given this proper consideration? To determine the talent of this egg alone costs 100 points, and even if it proves to be a Pokémon of primary aptitude, it is worth only 100 points. if you do not possess the necessary points. The employee trailed off, the implication clear. In Team Rocket, there was no such thing as credit. Cain nodded helplessly, for without testing the talent of the Pokémon egg, it would be deemed a red talent and worth only a single Team Rocket point. The staff member said nothing more, even though he couldn't fathom why the young lad before him was so insistent. If the Pokémon egg did not prove to possess a primary aptitude, Cain would have to bid farewell to it forever, unless he was willing to part with 100 points. Primary aptitude is a classification of Pokémon talents used by Team Rocket and the Pokémon World as a whole. Divided into 5 categories: no aptitude, primary aptitude, intermediate aptitude, advanced aptitude, and top aptitude, corresponding to the talent rankings of red, orange, yellow, and green respectively. Talents of blue, purple, and black are all considered top aptitude. The Pokémon egg was placed in the recess of the device, and a liquid, made by the association scientists, poured into the mouth cavity before the transparent lid of the device was sealed shut. The high cost of producing the liquid made each test a costly endeavor. With the press of a button, the instrument came to life with a hum. Beep! In the row of lights, the light representing no aptitude immediately illuminated. As the minimum talent for a Pokémon was red, this light was bound to light up during the test. Almost instantly, the second light flickered on, indicating that the Pokémon egg possessed a primary aptitude. Not bad, it actually has a primary aptitude, so at least you don't have to worry about not being able to pay the test fee. The employee said with a smile. Cain shrugged indifferently. As the light representing the primary aptitude grew brighter and brighter, 10 seconds later, the light representing intermediate aptitude began to flash. The staff member's expression changed as he looked at Cain. Having initially thought him a fool, he didn't expect the egg to possess an intermediate aptitude. When a Pokémon egg reached the intermediate aptitude, the minimum number of Team Rocket points that could be exchanged for it started at 1,000. This meant that the teenager before him would soon possess thousands of points, a monumental advantage in the trial. Aside from the select few trialists who already had support, he would be far ahead of the rest in terms of resources. From a faint candle-like brightness, the light gradually intensified as the detection device showed no signs of stopping. Low intermediate aptitude, medium intermediate aptitude, high intermediate aptitude. In the employee's eyes, the light representing intermediate aptitude lasted for 30 seconds before reaching its brightest point. Then, the light representing advanced aptitude began to glow faintly. Advanced aptitude. I cannot believe it. It's reached advanced aptitude. The staff member exclaimed in shock, hastily covering his mouth with his hand, but the shock in his eyes could not be concealed. Of course, having worked for Team Rocket for so long, he knew the value of an advanced aptitude Pokémon egg, worth tens of thousands of points. Even after all these years, he had never received that many points. An advanced aptitude Pokémon egg is more valuable than a wild Pokémon with the same aptitude, for when a Pokémon is with a trainer from the moment it is hatched, its bond and friendship become much stronger than that of a wild Pokémon that has already grown up. Once this Pokémon egg entered Team Rocket's exchange system, it would be fiercely contested by a number of officer-level Team Rocket members, and perhaps even the executives. Cain frowned, displeased at the shocked outburst from the employee. They were in the midst of a trial, and he was certain that if it was known that he had so many points, everyone would rally together to take him down and then divide the points among themselves. And for those who wanted to be number one in the rankings, Cain with so many points could upset the balance and be their biggest obstacle. The employee realized he had lost his composure. Fortunately, it was night and there was no one else in the exchange center, otherwise he feared the impact it would have had on the youngster before him. When he looked at Cain again, there was only shock and a hint of greed in his eyes. Though well hidden, Cain could still sense it. With over 10,000 Team Rocket points, Cain, who knew the value of points all too well, certainly understood the appeal. Though the staff member was not involved in the trial, he, as a member of Team Rocket, could not help but feel a hint of greed for those points. When the testing machine stopped, the light representing the advanced aptitude reached the middle point, medium advanced aptitude. Above the instrument, a screen displayed, medium advanced aptitude, Weedle. Seeing the test instrument stop, the staff member quickly exclaimed, I apologize, I do not possess the authority to exchange for advanced aptitude Pokémon eggs. Please wait for a moment. With that, he hastened to leave the counter, opened a secret door, and stepped inside. After a couple of minutes, the door opened again, and the clerk could be seen respectfully bowing his head and holding the door open. A man dressed in a black robe stepped out with an overwhelming killing intent surrounding him. When Cain saw the mysterious black-robed person, his body tensed. Murkrow also stiffened, his feathers standing on end as if facing a great enemy. The experience and keen instinct he had honed in his previous life told Cain that the person approaching him was dangerous. Very dangerous. The mysterious man's steps were slow, like an old man, as he approached the counter. When the mysterious man finally reached the counter, the pressure suddenly dissipated and Cain felt a wave of relief wash over him. Not bad. The mysterious man spoke 2 words, a hint of appreciation in his hoarse voice. To be able to remain calm under his intense killing intent deserved such praise from him. What a terrifying man, Cain thought to himself. He had no idea that the simple exchange of a green aptitude Pokémon egg would result in the appearance of such a formidable character. Chapter 26. The man's gaze fell upon the Pokémon egg in the testing machine, the flashing light that represented its advanced aptitude, and with a hint of doubt in his voice, he inquired, "How did you come by this Pokémon egg, my boy?" Cain, with a respectful air, replied, "I found it in a beedrill's nest, sir. It appears to be the offspring of the beedrill's leader. I hope to offer it as a gesture of goodwill." The man nodded, pleased with Cain's tact. With a wave of his hand, the man stated, "No need, I shan't take advantage of a young lad like yourself. This Weedle egg is likely worth 18,000 points. Give him 20,000 and deduct it from my card." The first part was addressed to Cain, while the second part was addressed to the staff member who stood respectfully by. "Yes, sir." The staff member bowed hastily. Cain stood silently. In the face of such power, if the man had insisted on taking the Pokémon egg, Cain would have had no choice but to offer it with open hands. For to go against such a powerful figure would be akin to hitting a boulder with an egg. This overwhelming sense of powerlessness was like a sharp knife being thrust into Cain's heart, suffocating him with an unfathomable feeling. This is the plight of the weak. Only the strong have the right to speak. Since his regression, Cain had never felt so helpless. His pride, hidden deep within him, had been torn from its tightly wrapped shell and exposed to the full light of day. But the thought of becoming stronger never left him. This time he was more determined than ever. Everything had gone so well in this life that he had begun to become arrogant, looking down on all his peers, believing that he had a huge advantage and that it was only a matter of time before he became powerful. But as a true powerhouse emerged, Cain found himself vulnerable. The mysterious man gazed upon Cain for a moment, then inquired, "Might you be interested in undertaking a task for me?" Taking a deep breath and pushing aside all thoughts, Cain responded politely, "I would be honored, sir. Come find me when you've completed this week's test," the man said, placing a black medallion upon the counter. "Yes, sir," Cain replied, his eyes flitting to the black medallion on the counter. At the sight of it, his pupils suddenly contracted. With a nod and one final glance at Cain, who kept his head lowered, the mysterious man disappeared through the secret door. As for the Weedle egg, it would no doubt be delivered to him. The staff member waited respectfully for the mysterious man's departure before letting out a long breath and wiping the sweat from his forehead. Cain, too, let out a small sigh of relief and picked up the black medallion, amidst the envious and jealous gaze of the clerk. He stared at the black medallion, whose overall shape resembled a cloud and whose pitch blackness held not a hint of any other color, with a complicated expression. The Black Cloud, a special medallion belonging to Team Rocket's top-secret force, the Shadow Unit, which took orders only from Team Rocket's boss, Giovanni. Aside from Giovanni, only the Shadow Unit's leader and 2 deputies were authorized to award this medallion. The Shadow Unit was not part of the normal Team Rocket structure, and all of its members were handpicked by the 3 leaders. There were no other avenues of entry. The 3 leaders of the Shadow Unit were all above elite level, so the mysterious man must be one of them. Though this medallion was only for reserve members, its meaning was clear. As long as one could complete the tasks given by the mysterious man, one could become an official member of the Shadow Unit. The Shadow Unit, reporting solely to Giovanni, could also be considered his personal force and thus stood 1 rank higher than its peers. In simpler terms, if a Team Rocket Grunt were a member of the Shadow Unit, his rank would be 1 level above that of an ordinary Team Rocket Grunt, on par with an ordinary Team Rocket Junior Officer. The legend of Team Rocket's Shadow Unit had always been whispered about. Cain had only heard of it in his past life, never expecting to encounter it in this one. Why did he choose me? Is it simply because of the Pokémon egg? Cain pondered, a frown creasing his brow. There was no reason to award a reserve member medallion after only meeting him for the first time, and with his current strength, he should not have caught this person's attention. Even if he had, he should not forget that his current identity was that of a trialist. Were he not a regressor, he would not have understood the weight of this medallion. Suppressing the various speculations in his mind, he feigned confusion and queried, "Excuse me, this medallion." The staff member immediately donned a different smile. "I'm sorry, but I cannot reveal any information." Cain nodded and asked no further questions. He stored the medallion in his belt. It was best to know as little as possible about this dangerous matter. Despite his newfound knowledge, Cain did not forget the main purpose of his visit. The Weedle egg had been exchanged for 20,000 points, far exceeding his expectations. This was 20,000 Team Rocket points. How many valuable items could be acquired in exchange? Cain felt that he must now possess the most points among the island's elite. However, points were meaningless if they were not converted into power, emphasizing their usefulness. Scanning the exchange list, he bypassed the inexpensive items and turned to the TM list. Cain had already analyzed which moves Murkrow needed to learn. First and foremost, Murkrow's speed was impressive, and with the boost from Tailwind, it could be increased even further. In terms of attack, as a dark and flying-type Pokémon, his mastery of flying-type moves was sufficient and their damage could be dealt effectively, likely due to his battles with bug-type Pokémon and the resulting improvement in his proficiency with flying energy. However, his dark-type moves were a weakness, despite dark-type being Murkrow's strongest talent. These moves could only be learned after reaching a certain level. Therefore, in order to increase Murkrow's damage output, Cain would consider choosing some dark-type moves. Another consideration was Murkrow's speed. While it was difficult to find a Pokémon that could match it, it was not impossible. Moreover, as seen in the physical battle between Murkrow and the Beedrill leader, Murkrow's body had always been his weakness. It was a species flaw that could not be fixed solely through training. If Cain and Murkrow were to encounter a Pokémon that was equally fast and had a high attack, Murkrow could be killed in one blow. Even if they did not encounter such a Pokémon, Murkrow's fragility would make it a primary target in group battles. Therefore, Cain prioritized the selection of life-saving moves. At the same time, Murkrow possessed a hidden ability, Prankster, which increased the priority of its status moves. It was already a powerful ability, and it would be a shame if it were not used to its fullest potential. Suddenly, Cain remembered something and took out a silver-white box from his storage belt. It was the same box he had found with the treasure map, and inside it was a TM, likely of the normal type. He placed the box upon the counter and called out to the employee whose attitude had improved, "Please assist me in identifying what move this is." Hearing Cain's request, the clerk opened the box with suspicion, and upon seeing the TM inside, he couldn't help but show a surprised expression and think to himself, "What a fortunate child." As the TM was placed on the special device, words appeared on the electronic screen above. There was no attempt to conceal it from Cain, so he too saw what was written: Move, Screech, normal type status move. The explanation of the move read, "It emits a piercing sound that greatly lowers the opponent's defense." Cain was overjoyed. It was a stroke of luck that the TM turned out to be Screech. Though this move was not as valuable as Protect or Substitute, it was still quite rare. Additionally, it was highly suitable for Murkrow, a high-speed, high-attack Pokémon akin to an assassin. The ability to drastically lower an opponent's defense by 2 stages was highly useful, particularly in group battles. Screech, paired with Murkrow's high attack and speed, could be used to instantly finish off an opponent and then retreat, perfectly aligning with Murkrow's fighting style. Cain had also considered trading for some status moves to improve Murkrow's fighting ability, and acquiring Screech had helped Cain save some points. It was no wonder that when the staff member saw this TM, he couldn't help but mutter to himself about how fortunate Cain was. As someone who worked in an exchange center, he surely knew the value of this move, which was only slightly lower than that of moves such as Protect. Cain smiled at Murkrow. He believed that after this exchange was completed, Murkrow's fighting ability would be greatly improved. Chapter 27. Cain cast his gaze upon the exchange list, scouring it for the moves that would aid him in his quest. "I want these too," he announced, his finger tapping upon the coveted items. Move, Protect. Type: Normal. Category: Status: Power: 0. Description: Forms a protective shield around the body that completely blocks the opponent's attack for a certain period of time. It cannot be used continuously and has a cooldown of 10 minutes once used. Price: 5,000 points. Move: Substitute. Type: Normal. Category: Status: Power: 0. Description: Reduce your own health and create a clone/decoy to take an attack for yourself. Price: 4,000 points. The cost of these two moves was a steep 9,000 Team Rocket points, but as fate would have it, Cain had obtained a valuable green Pokémon egg, thus rendering the cost a mere trifle. Without this stroke of luck, he may not have been able to trade for a Protect TM even at the end of this trial. The staff member's eyes flicked with surprise as he watched Cain's emotionless face trade for TMs at such a high price. He couldn't help but think the young man didn't understand the true value of points. With deft fingers, the staff member unlocked the safe containing the TMs and retrieved 2 items that shone with a brilliant white light. He handed them to Cain with care. For Cain, These points were but a drop in the ocean. Without being converted into effective combat power, they were nothing more than a pile of useless data. But when converted, they held immense value. With the acquisition of both Protect and Substitute, Murkrow's chances of survival in battle were greatly increased. Coupled with his already impressive speed, as long as he did not encounter an opponent of vastly superior level, Murkrow would be a formidable force to be reckoned with. With 11,000 Team Rocket points still at his disposal, Cain set his sights on obtaining Murkrow's Dark-type moves. Without hesitation, he redeemed the powerful Dark Pulse move, spending a further 3,000 points. As a Dark-type special move, Dark Pulse possessed impressive power, a high hit rate, and the added bonus of potentially causing the opponent to flinch. Cain pondered for a moment before deciding to save the remaining 8,000 points. He could have traded for more moves, but it would have been fruitless. The difference between learning and mastering a move was vast. What Murkrow needed now was not to learn more moves, but to master the ones he had learned, so that they could be employed with ease in battle. Cain pondered for a moment before speaking. I require a training device for flight-type Pokémon, one that can be freely controlled in weight, with an upper limit of 25 kilograms. Such a device would be ideal for Murkrow's training regimen. Murkrow had been using wood as a weight-bearing tool for some time, but as the bird grew stronger, it became increasingly difficult to find heavier wood to tie to his wings. Team Rocket scientists had come across research on such a device, and while they had not been able to replicate the exact device, they had created one that allowed for free weight control. It had become one of Team Rocket's various training devices. This type of weight machine did not require a great deal of technology to construct, and therefore was not costly. A training device with a maximum capacity of 25 kilograms cost only 200 Team Rocket points. And let's get 10 Great Balls as well, Cain added, each Great Ball worth 50 points, for a total of 500 Team Rocket points. He promptly stored them in his storage belt. Cain had not initially intended to capture any more Pokémon on this island, but after his conversation with the mysterious man, he had changed his mind. The final trial was not overly difficult for Cain, aside from Xander and a couple of others that presented a bit of a challenge. The rest were mere minions. But now, not only did Cain have to face the final trial, but he also had to complete some minor tasks for the mysterious man before the final trial. Though it might be a small task for the mysterious man, it could prove to be a difficult task for Cain. It was imperative that he begin training other Pokémon. After collecting the 10 Great Balls, he handed the magnetic card that represented his identity to the clerk, watching as it was swiped again and again, until there were 7,200 points remaining on the card. The exchange cost a total of 12,700 points, with the remaining 100 points used to check the talent of the Pokémon egg. The exclusive move learning machine was nestled in the corner of the exchange center, a marvel of the Pokémon World. It operated by transferring the move from a TM directly into the Pokémon's mind, enabling the Pokémon to learn the move instantly. This was one of the most advanced technologies in the Pokémon World. The move learning device was available to use at no cost, but first, Cain replaced Murkrow's original Pokeball with a Great Ball. The space inside the Pokeball was transformed from a humble abode to a grand mansion. Though Murkrow hardly spent any time in a Pokeball, since Cain had the means, it was certainly a wise decision to ensure Murkrow's comfort. After Cain placed Murkrow in the Great Ball, he inserted the Great Ball into the slot of the move learning machine and retrieved the TMs from his storage belt. He then activated the machine and began using them, one by one. Fortuitously, it was nighttime and the exchange center was empty save for Cain and the employee. Had anyone else been present and witnessed Cain using all 4 TMs at once, they would have scolded him for his extravagance. For other Pokémon, it might have been considered greedy to learn so many moves at once, but for Murkrow, with his green aptitude, it was simply a matter of time before he mastered these moves. As the TM was used, it reverted to a regular disc with no value. Each TM took about a minute to use, and when the process was complete for all of them, Cain released Murkrow from the Great Ball. Caw! As soon as he emerged, Murkrow immediately took to the air. For him, who rarely entered a Pokeball, it was spacious but not as comfortable as being outside. Smiling and stroking Murkrow's feathers, Cain asked gently, "How is it? Have you learned everything?" Though he knew it was impossible for Murkrow to not have learned, he asked nonetheless. Caw! Caw! Murkrow nodded immediately. It felt incredible. Moves he had not known before had magically appeared in his mind, along with the knowledge of how to use them. It was as if they were his natural moves. As if to demonstrate that he had indeed learned them, Murkrow's eyes narrowed and a pale green energy shield enveloped his entire body. The shield shimmered for a mere 2 seconds before fading away. "Protect!" Cain exclaimed, his eyes alight with recognition. Protect was a staple for almost every Pokémon once their power reached a certain level. It was a valuable and efficient life-saving move that rendered one immune to damage unconditionally. To say it was a divine life-saving ability would not be an exaggeration. Murkrow attempted to use the move again, but found that he could not release it. Cain reached out to stop Murkrow from trying further, a smile playing upon his lips. This move can only be used after 10 minutes. Come on, let's go back. With that, Cain took Murkrow and departed the exchange center, their silhouettes disappearing into the darkness of the night. As Cain left, the employee couldn't help but think that he was lucky to have been chosen by the mysterious man, not realizing that Cain knew more about the mysterious man's strength and status than he did. Cain was just uncertain if it would be a blessing or a curse. The Team Rocket base had always provided 300 rooms for trialists to stay in. On the door of each room was a number corresponding to the number of each trialist. Walking in the middle of the night, only the silhouettes of Cain and Murkrow could be seen under the moonlight. The dormitory rooms were arranged in a very regular manner, and Cain soon located the room that belonged to him. Although he had never stayed there before, the room was relatively clean, with a single bed, a small desk, and a chair. It was simple, but for Cain, who was accustomed to living outdoors, a soft bed was all he required. Cain lay down on the bed after locking the door behind him, groaning at the softness he had not felt in quite some time. Murkrow, who was also experiencing a human room for the first time, began to fly around with curiosity. In a manse situated in the heart of Team Rocket's base, two individuals sat in an office belonging to Team Rocket's chief instructor, Viper. Viper held a precious luxury ball in his hand, and gently wiped away the non-existent dust with a handkerchief. He gazed at the luxury ball with passion, as if it were a lover, finally saying, "I heard there's a boy you're interested in." The mysterious man sitting across the table was entirely concealed within his black robe. He did not move or respond. Chapter 28. The air between the two men hung heavy with silence, but it was a silence that was not at all out of place. The mysterious man, who was well versed in the ways of Team Rocket and its inner workings, was not surprised that Viper had uncovered his actions so swiftly. After all, this was his territory and all the people here were his men. If Viper had not known, it would have been a surprise indeed. With a low, muffled hum, the mysterious man gave his answer, and Viper, with his scarred face, smiled in response. The two of them were well acquainted, and Viper, as a senior member of Team Rocket, had some understanding of the mysterious man's identity and the shadow unit to which he belonged. The mysterious man's ability to notice Cain was a sure sign that there was something unique about the boy, but if the mysterious man did not wish to speak of it, Viper would not pry. As if sensing Viper's thoughts, the mysterious man hesitated for a moment before saying, "I felt a darkness from this boy, and a hint of familiarity." The two men paused for a moment, before the mysterious man spoke again, solemnly and with great weight. "The feeling he gave me was just like him." Viper, who had been leisurely wiping his luxury ball, heard the mysterious man's last words and his hand suddenly stilled, as if someone had hit the pause button. And so, they both came to a halt. After a few moments, Viper's hand trembled slightly before resuming his wiping motion. However, it was clear to anyone with a discerning eye that the words spoken had a great impact on his heart. The mysterious man, too, remained silent, knowing that what he had just said was shocking. "This is truly surprising," Viper said, his words coming slowly and with great effort. The him was none other than the leader of Giovanni's shadow unit, the most mysterious existence in Team Rocket, whose status was just below Giovanni's, a man who could be said to be below one person and above all others. And while outsiders may have known of the strength of Team Rocket's 3 senior executives, the invincible army of the 4 executives, and the insane trio called the 3 Beasts, they did not know of the shadow unit within Team Rocket, a force that was more mysterious and terrifying than the rest. Not wanting to say too much on the subject, Viper coughed slightly to conceal his emotions. "Ahem, I heard you got an advanced aptitude Pokémon egg from him?" With a subtle nod, the mysterious man reached under his black robes and produced a Pokémon egg, the same green aptitude Weedle egg that Cain had exchanged for points. Even as the deputy leader of the shadow unit, the mysterious man was hesitant to become too embroiled in the matter. "A Weedle?" Viper recognized the Pokémon egg at a glance. The mysterious man stretched out his hand, which only had 2 fingers left, and placed it on the egg, which gave off a warm feeling. "That's right," he replied. He escaped under the hands of 2 senior elite trainers and lost 3 of his main Pokémon, while his other main Pokémon also suffered various degrees of injury and needed time to recover. With its rapid growth cycle, it can quickly become a formidable fighting force, and with a little training, it can reach the strength of a quasi-elite, the mysterious man continued. Although its lifespan is relatively short, it's enough for a transition. He was well aware of Beedrill's weaknesses, but he never intended to train it as his main force. "What? Your Pokémon still need a long time to recover from their injuries?" Viper asked curiously, knowing that although the mysterious man's Pokémon were badly injured, he shouldn't have needed to raise new Pokémon. The mysterious man fell silent and sighed softly. That's to be expected when you face a poison-type senior elite trainer. I don't know when they can recover, so I'll just treat this Beedrill as a backup plan. Hearing this, Viper understood the situation and said nothing more. Instead, he continued to polish the luxury ball in his hand. Once again, the two fell into silence. The night passed in the blink of an eye. Cain and Murkrow had not stopped training the night before, except that they had moved from the original wide-open forest to the small dormitory where they were now. The weight-bearing device resembled a small backpack and could be adjusted to the proper size, allowing Murkrow to stretch freely. When the load was off, the device was as light as a piece of clothing. The device was so small that, once fully attached to the body, it hid under Murkrow's feathers, making it virtually undetectable unless one looked closely. The weight of the device could be adjusted by remote control. Cain set it to 5 kilograms, which was the weight Murkrow usually used for training. Murkrow's body sank after Cain activated the device, and he had to flap his wings with more force to fly. However, unlike before, when two pieces of wood were strapped together and the weight was distributed only over the wings, the weight was now distributed evenly throughout the body, making it more comfortable than before and allowing every part of Murkrow's body to get a workout. Let's keep it at this weight for now. It's not good to increase too much at once. When your body has fully adjusted to the weight, we'll increase it slightly, Cain said with a smile as he looked at Murkrow, who was quickly getting used to the new device. From today on, if it's not necessary, the device will stay activated at this weight, so you'll have to get used to it gradually. Cain had always admired Murkrow's determination to improve his strength. He also wanted Murkrow to become stronger, but he still valued the thoughts of his Pokémon very seriously. If Murkrow wasn't the type of Pokémon that liked to fight, Cain wouldn't force him but would find a more suitable Pokémon. Caw. Caw. Murkrow was already excited at the prospect of becoming stronger with this device. Cain and Murkrow had a simple breakfast after a short morning exercise. By the time they left the room, the sun had risen and the doors of the previously occupied dormitories were opening one by one, with individuals emerging from them, all making their way to the square in the center of the base. 7 days had passed and it was time for the second test, and almost everyone had returned and gathered in the square. The Team Rocket staff also began to appear one by one, and the Team Rocket grunts who kept order were also working hard to complete their tasks. After a week, about 120 of the original 150 or so people remained, while the other 30 or so were either still in the forest and unable to return or would never return. The innocent and youthful faces had vanished, and everyone had a cold and indifferent look, with a hint of madness in their eyes, as the cruel trial consumed the goodness, beauty, and innocence in everyone's heart. The square was divided into 4 areas. The largest number of people were in the area where Cain stood. Most of them were alone, but occasionally 2 people stood together with caution in their eyes. This area accounted for nearly half of the total number of trial participants. The second largest group of people was in the south of the square, led by none other than Xander. He was surrounded by a large number of strong people. When Cain looked over, he met the eyes of Xander, who had been staring at him for a long time. Xander gave Cain an evil smile and turned his head to look elsewhere. The third largest group was in the area to the west, led by a woman. Cain was struck by her Pokémon size, which was a Zubat that was far bigger than the norm, and it was this that made an impression on him. The eastern corner was the least crowded, with only 9 people, led by a cheerfully smiling teenager. Although he seemed harmless, the coldness in his eyes caught Cain's attention. All 8 people around him seemed to be fooled by his appearance. None of them had the vision to see through his facade. If they had been born in the association, it wouldn't have been a problem, but this was Team Rocket, and this was a trial island with a high mortality rate. Betrayal was commonplace. As the minutes ticked by, the place began to quiet down. Chief Instructor Viper and his men also made their way to the high platform in the center of the arena. Unlike before, there were now 2 chairs on the platform, with Viper sitting on one and a mysterious black-robed man sitting on the other. I didn't expect him to show up, Cain thought as he saw the mysterious man. As if sensing Cain's gaze, the mysterious man turned his head in Cain's direction, his face hidden beneath his black robe. But Cain could feel his gaze resting on his own body for a few seconds before moving away. Chapter 29. Viper's eyes scanned the field with a keen, assessing gaze. He nodded in satisfaction as he took in the expressions of the trialists. Faces that had once been filled with innocence now contorted with determination and fear. But Viper paid little heed to the dwindling numbers. There were still more than enough trialists to meet his needs. Compared to previous years, the quality of this year's crop was high, and he was pleased to see that there were still over 120 left. Glancing at the man beside him, he gave a subtle signal to the grunts, signaling the start of the second test. The second test, like the first, was designed to measure the attack value. Though this test alone could not accurately reflect a trialist's overall strength, it was still a necessary benchmark. But as the trialists listened to the explanation of the test, they learned of a new, sinister rule. The last place in this and all future tests would be eliminated. Panic and confusion erupted in the square, as the trialists grappled with the implications of this rule. Many feared that their journey would end here and that their lives would be forfeit. Although only 50 people were able to pass the final trial, not all those who failed would be doomed to death. Team Rocket would not participate in such a costly endeavor. As long as the trialists survived until the end and met the standard of strength, they would be given the opportunity to start as low-ranking grunts. Though their resources would be limited, they would at least have their lives. And with the right connections, their journey might still not be over. But with the addition of this new rule, the plans of those who had hoped to survive until the end using this loophole were now in jeopardy. Each step forward could be their last, and one misstep could mean game over. Like a herd of sheep being pursued by a lion, the slowest among them would always be the first to fall. And so the flock would have to run faster, for no one wanted to be the last. This was the law of survival, the law of the jungle. Team Rocket had become the lion and the trialists the sheep. And those who fell behind would be devoured. The voices in the square grew louder, filled with the panicked cries of the weaker trialists. "Silence!" Viper bellowed, his frown deepening in anger. As a man who had risen from the ashes of countless battles, he despised the weak and their feeble cries. If you don't want to take the test, don't take it. But know that you will be treated as last place. Under Viper's fury, the panicked discussions were silenced. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of a man who held their life and death in his hands. Under the direction of the Team Rocket's grunts, the trialists braced themselves and began to form a line, but no one wanted to be the first to take the test. The delay only served to darken Viper's mood further. The grunts, sensing their boss' displeasure, glared at the trialists with fierce eyes. They knew all too well the terror Viper was capable of. "I'll go first," a voice spoke up, belonging to Xander, who stepped forward with a disdainful look on his face, Ekans following closely at his side, exuding an aura of danger. With someone taking the lead, the rest slowly lined up. Under the arrangement of the Team Rocket grunts, Cain was placed at the back of the line. "Begin the test," the proctor shouted, standing next to the trial stone. Without hesitation, Xander stepped forward, Ekans by his side, ready to prove his worth. "Ekans, use bite." With a fierce hiss, Ekans coiled its body like a tightly wound spring before striking out with explosive force. Black light glowed at the tips of its fangs as it bit down on the trial stone with a single powerful strike, before quickly retreating. Ekans' execution was meticulous, showcasing Xander's skill as a Pokémon trainer. Attack value, 258. The proctor announced, recording the result with a look of astonishment. An uproar erupted among the crowd. As expected from Boss Xander, the attack value is an impressive 258 points, almost 3 times higher than the 98 points in the first test. One of Xander's subordinates exclaimed in awe. "Holy shit, that's huge." Another trialist exclaimed in shock. "This is not good," others muttered, feeling the pressure mounting. Xander's lips curled into a smirk as he strode off the stage, basking in the admiration of his peers. One by one, the trialists stepped forward to take the test, some leaving the stage elated and excited, others sad and dejected. Whenever a trialist learned that they were in last place, their faces would turn ashen, sweat pouring down their foreheads, their hands clenched tightly together as they stared at the other trialists, their hearts crying out for someone with a lower attack value to appear. And when that person finally did appear, they would almost collapse in relief, as if a great burden had been lifted from their shoulders. And the new last-place trialist would repeat their actions, always hoping that someone with a lower value than them would appear. One by one, the trialists were put to the test, and in first place, as expected, was Xander with his impressive score of 258 points. In second place was Jasmine, the young girl with the gigantic Zubat, scoring 227 points. In third place was a loner, with chiseled good looks, and his Poochyena scoring 225 points, just 2 points less than Jasmine, a surprise to many. In fourth place was none other than the young man who had previously been branded as a smiling tiger by Cain. A young man who always wore a sunny grin, yet hid a dark heart underneath. His name was Soros, and he scored 215 points with his coughing. And finally, it was Cain's turn to take the test. Xander, who had been watching from the sidelines, wiped away his contemptuous smile and grew serious. Even Viper and the mysterious man sitting next to him leaned forward in interest. What kind of result would this kid, who always seemed to surprise others, achieve? As Cain stepped onto the stage, Several of the other trialists recognized him. It's him, the one who came in second place last time. Someone shouted immediately. I wonder what his score will be today. Another said curiously. Che, what can his score be? Those little tricks are useless now, a third said sourly. In the first test, because Cain used a trick to get second place, he fell from 10th to 11th place, missing out on 100 Team Rocket points. That Murkrow isn't weak. Of course, those with good judgment could tell at a glance that Murkrow was definitely not weak, based on its size alone. Ignoring the chatter around him, Cain calmly said, Murkrow, full power wing attack. With a powerful flap of his wings, Murkrow let out a scream and flew straight at the test stone. The surging flying energy was under his control as it gathered on his wings. Boom! Without the slightest pause, and without using any tricks, Murkrow's wing attack made firm contact. After a few moments, a single line appeared above the trial stone, attack value, 265. The proctor, unable to contain his surprise, swallowed hard and took a deep breath before shouting, attack value, 265 points, currently ranked first, next. Immediately, gasps could be heard throughout the silent crowd. 265 points. Damn! Could the trial stone be malfunctioning? One of the trialists cried out in shock. Their impression of Cain had always been that of an opportunistic second-place finisher in the first test, and his true strength was only on par with theirs. But this test had proven them all wrong. They knew that Cain was a loner, with no help or resources, yet he had managed to achieve such a score. Xander, too, was stunned. He had met Cain once before and knew that he was not the opportunist that others had claimed, but had real strength. However, he had never expected Cain's score to be higher than his own. Could it be that the wilderness can make people grow so fast? Xander began to doubt his own approach. Was gathering a group of people better for his growth than practicing in the wilderness? Chapter 30. Xander's subordinates trembled with fear, particularly the one who had dared to call for Cain's arrest the previous day. Sweat dripped down his face as he shivered, grateful for Xander's intervention to prevent any rash actions. Though this trial did not fully reflect a person's strength, it was still a clear indication of a portion of it. Could an average trialist withstand such a powerful attack? Cain, however, was indifferent to the thoughts of his peers. As soon as he activated his AI system, he knew that none of them would be able to keep up with him. It was a confidence that belonged solely to him. He descended from the stage, Murkrow by his side, and made his way to a corner, leaning against a pillar and closing his eyes. He had no interest in the results of the other trialists. Viper, perched on the podium, scowled. He was not surprised by Cain's result, but it irked him that someone had been favored by the mysterious man next to him to achieve such an outcome. In his opinion, the result was even a bit low. However, there was one small detail that caught his attention. This Murkrow, it seems. Viper's suspicions were not fully confirmed, and he turned to the mysterious man for clarification. The mysterious man understood Viper's doubt, and though he was slightly taken aback, he nodded, his hoarse voice echoing from beneath his black robe. You are correct, it is carrying a load. Viper was almost certain of his suspicions, but he was impressed that this boy had been able to raise his flawed Murkrow so well in such a short amount of time. Adjusting his seat, Viper said, Then this boy is quite impressive. If your shadow unit does not take him in, may I have him? The mysterious man's lips curled upward under his black robe as he asked, What do you think? Viper pouted. How tedious. You shadow unit people always take things so seriously. He was well aware of the rules of the shadow unit. Until the mission set by the shadow unit was completed, no one from Team Rocket could interfere, unless the mission failed or the selected person died. From the moment Cain accepted the reserve member medal given to him by the mysterious man, he was considered to be half a member of the shadow unit. The members of the shadow unit were generally very exclusive, even within Team Rocket. Of course, the mysterious man and Viper were exceptions, as they had been close friends before joining Team Rocket. Therefore, as long as Cain did not complete the shadow unit's mission, or as long as Cain was not judged to have failed the mission, the rest of Team Rocket would have no right to accept him into their team. Even the top executives were subject to this rule, set by Team Rocket's boss, Giovanni himself. As the most powerful force within Team Rocket, every member of the shadow unit was carefully selected. Be careful what you say, Viper. The mysterious man's tone became more serious when he heard Viper's words. Although he and Viper were good friends, he had a deep respect for the shadow unit and for Giovanni. Even Cain admired Giovanni. He was the most charismatic person Cain had ever met, exuding a natural charisma like true royalty. If Cain had truly been from this world and had grown up in Team Rocket, he would have undoubtedly become one of Giovanni's loyal followers. However, as an outsider to this world, Cain had a natural resistance to Giovanni. Nonetheless, in his previous life, Cain had immense respect and admiration for Giovanni. Team Rocket was just a small organization in the Kanto region more than 10 years ago, when the head of Team Rocket was Giovanni's mother. Team Rocket didn't have much power back then, as evidenced by the fact that Giovanni's first Pokémon was only a Beedrill. Who would have used a Beedrill as their child's first Pokémon if they had vast resources? However, that Beedrill ended up becoming the strongest Beedrill in the world, using resources that could have trained a few pseudo-legendary Pokémon. In short, Team Rocket, which was a small regional organization a decade ago, had become the largest and most powerful evil organization in the Kanto region in just 10 years. The rest of the underground organizations were either eliminated or absorbed, making Team Rocket the most dominant force in the region, aside from the Pokémon Association. This was a testament to Giovanni's abilities as a leader and a skilled Pokémon trainer. He was able to battle champions head-on without losing, earning him the nickname Giovanni of the Land. As the first group that Giovanni created after becoming the leader of Team Rocket, it could be said that the Shadow Unit was raised by Giovanni himself. With his charisma, it was no surprise that the members of the Shadow Unit worshipped him. Viper knew that he had crossed a line with a mysterious man, but he did not take offense to the obvious warning. In the eyes of the rest of Team Rocket, the members of the Shadow Unit were considered fanatics, willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals, and it was best not to cross them if possible. After a brief exchange, the two men fell back into silence. The test was quick, consisting of each person and their Pokémon attacking the trial stone and recording the data. Soon, everyone was finished. The final rankings were as follows. First place, attack value, 265 points, Cain. Second place, attack value, 258 points, Xander. Third place, attack value, 227 points, Jasmine. Fourth place, attack value, 225 points, Alan. Fifth place, attack value, 215 points, Soros. 123rd place, attack value, 45 points. There was little change in the top few places. Cain and Xander remained at the head of the rankings, pulling away from the rest of the trialists. As for the last place, he had only a pitiful 45 points. Even in the first test, he had been in the middle of the pack. Although his Pokémon was a Rattata, a properly trained and nurtured Rattata could still produce explosive attacks, as seen in this test where the highest-ranked person with a Rattata reached the top 10. With an ashen face, the last-ranked trialist stood frozen. He never expected to be the lowest-ranked, muttering, "No way, no way, no way" in disbelief. He didn't react until the Team Rocket grunt in charge approached him menacingly and grabbed his shoulder, ready to take him away. The trialist struggled fiercely, but he was no match for the well-trained and battle-hardened Team Rocket grunt whose iron-like hands held him in a vice-like grip. "No, no, no, no. Give me another chance. Give me one more chance." Crying out and begging for mercy was useless. Snot and tears were streaming down his face, and a yellow liquid was oozing from between his legs, emitting an unpleasant odor. But it was all in vain. "Rattata, come and help me." He finally realized that, as a trainer, he had his own Pokémon. But before the Rattata could act, two large mighty hyenas appeared right in front of it, baring their teeth and giving it a deadly stare. The Rattata wanted to save its trainer, but it was too afraid to move. "Take care of it." Viper, sitting on the platform, witnessed the scene with indifference and even a hint of annoyance. He was tired of wasting resources and unmotivated trash. What was the point of training a Rattata with some value if it was only at this level in the hands of someone like this? Under the merciless gaze of the two mighty hyenas, the Rattata lost its life. Seeing his last hope die, the trialist gave up all resistance and was dragged away from the crowd by the Team Rocket's grunts. There was no doubt in anyone's mind as to his eventual demise. In front of everyone, Team Rocket once again showed their ruthless side, treating human life as nothing more than insignificant. Cain watched the scene unfold without the slightest fluctuation in his emotions. It was just one life. Dozens of people had died by his hands. Which Team Rocket member didn't have the blood of a few lives on their hands? He had once thought that Team Rocket was just like in the anime, that they would just show up and then be sent flying, but that was just the fantasy of the anime. Killing the chicken to scare the monkeys, that's a good tactic. Cain thought silently to himself. Cain had a certain understanding of what Viper was doing. He was just warning those who were fooling around. If you don't move forward, you will die. For the powerful trialists present, there was no ripple in their hearts, and apart from a slight touch of contempt, they didn't think much of it, as such things had nothing to do with them anyway. It was like the well-known catfish effect, where a group of sardines would all die if left alone in a net. But if a catfish was put in, all the sardines would begin to swim away under the deterrent of the catfish, avoiding the catfish's predation, which ultimately resulted in the sardines reaching the fish market alive and fetching high prices. Today, they were like sardines, and Team Rocket was the catfish, and only under the relentless prodding of the catfish could all the sardines stay alive and sell for high prices. Only then could all the trialists work harder to improve and allow Team Rocket to acquire potentially stronger individuals. Chapter 31. The end of the test had been as uneventful as an evening spent in the company of a drowsy, with only the top 10 trialists summoned to the stage, swiping their ID cards to receive a mere 200 Team Rocket points each. To others, such a trifle might have seemed a bountiful reward, but to Cain, who still had over 7,000 points to his name, it was but a drop in the ocean. Team Rocket's point control was as strict as a gym leader's regimen, and it was only by a stroke of luck that Cain had come across a rare green aptitude Pokémon egg, aided in no small part by the AI system, that he had been able to accumulate 20,000 points so swiftly. Others were not so fortunate. The main way to earn points in Team Rocket was still by completing missions, for that was the most stable source of points. Catching rare talented Pokémon or finding various rare items to trade for points, however, was a game of chance, dependent on one's luck and vision. Cain's advantage was that he had an AI system, which made it impossible for him to remain unaware whenever a rare talented Pokémon appeared before him. Thus, compared to others, Cain's most stable way to gain points was by catching different Pokémon, and the only thing that could limit him was luck. But, as with all things, there are times when one should be ostentatious and times when one should keep a low profile. For if one were always to catch rare Pokémon to exchange for points, what would others think? How could someone tell the talent of a Pokémon without using any instruments? Would they not ask to be dragged off to the lab to be studied? Thus, the crowd gradually dispersed, their faces sullen, for what had just happened was like a time bomb, constantly reminding them that they had to work hard. After this incident, everyone's level of effort would have to go up a notch, and if they did not work harder, they would die. Viper and the mysterious figure garbed in black robes had already departed the square, surrounded by a phalanx of Team Rocket grunts. For men of their status and position, trifling matters were of little concern, and of course, their minions would see to it that everything was taken care of. Had it not been for the fact that the quality of each batch of trialists affected Viper's annual income, he would not have deigned to be troubled by a group of small children. Would a supposed elite-level powerhouse be bothered by a band of recruits not even worthy of a normal coach's attention? Besides wanting to accompany Viper to assess the quality of this group of trainees, the mysterious man also had another motive. He wanted to learn more about Cain. Though he had bestowed upon Cain the Shadow Unit Reserve Member Medal the day prior, he knew little about him as a person and thus used the test as an opportunity to observe him. And from the results, it seemed Cain still met his minimum standards. As Cain was making ready to depart, Xander and his subordinates blocked his path. Caw. The first to step forward at the sight of trouble was, of course, Murkrow. Gaba. Not to be outdone by Murkrow's display, Xander's Ekans coiled its body slightly, not in fear, but in its most terrifying attack stance. The most terrifying moment when facing a snake is not when it opens its mouth wide and bares its fangs, but when it curls up and tightens its muscles, showing that it is ready to strike at any moment, its muscles going from taut to slack, like the release of a tightly drawn bow. Cain stroked Murkrow's feathers gently, gesturing for him not to be nervous. Watching Cain's actions, Xander raised an eyebrow and also gestured to his Ekans not to get too excited. With a flicker of light in his eyes, Cain scanned Ekans' data with his system. Pokémon, Ekans, light green, gender, male, level, 16, type, poison, ability, intimidate, held items, none, egg moves, pursuit, poison fang, scary face, basic moves, wrap, leer, poison sting, bite, glare, taunt moves, snatch, technical machines, TM's double team. The reason it was slightly weaker than Murkrow was partly due to its light green talent, which was one order lower than Murkrow's, and partly because of its innate species strength. Although species strength is a theoretical concept that does not have a critical effect on the Pokémon as long as it is trained well, it must be said that there is a difference in strength between different species. After all, what would be the point of distinguishing between a pseudo-legendary Pokémon like Dratini and a common Pokémon like Pidgey? Was there truly no difference? Even more surprising to Cain was that the Ekans had learned Double Team. He remembered that the price at the exchange center was 1,000 Team Rocket points. Cain guessed that Xander's subordinates had also contributed a lot of their points, so that Xander could actually scrape together 1,000 points in a week. Cain and Xander both remained silent, each waiting for the other to speak first. Meanwhile, those standing behind Xander also kept their mouths shut, especially those who had acted arrogantly yesterday. "I did not expect to end up underestimating you," Xander said with a straight face. He had originally believed that no one in the trial could compare to him, and he had absolute confidence in himself. Had Cain not interfered, Xander would indeed have continued to rise to the top, as evidenced by his previous life where he was on the verge of becoming a Team Rocket executive. Cain also somehow knew what Xander was thinking. Xander had thought that he would be the protagonist, but now that he had been surpassed by Cain, he was sure that his inner resentments would begin to boil over. But even if he knew what was coming, Cain wouldn't do anything to change that. "So what now?" Cain said indifferently, his face remaining as impassive as a sphinx. Xander's face gradually clouded over, feeling Cain's indifference towards him as a form of contempt. As Xander's expression changed, his subordinates all lowered their heads and played ostrich, too afraid to speak up. If they were facing anyone else in this situation, as Xander's lackeys, they would have certainly jumped out and cursed, but in front of Cain, they did not dare to do so. Who would dare to provoke a man who could rank higher than even Xander? Xander also saw the behavior of his subordinates, and his face grew even darker. Cain stood before him, calm and quiet, waiting to see what he would do next. As Xander's face grew darker and darker, his heart was not at ease either, as he realized that his greatest asset right now was his older brother, a senior officer of Team Rocket. But since Xander was determined to surpass his brother, he did not want to use his brother's name to pressure others. However, even if he did, he wouldn't necessarily be able to scare Cain away. "Humph!" Without a word and with a cold grunt, he turned and quickly walked away. If he stood there any longer, he was afraid that he might not be able to control himself from making a move. As for whether he could beat Cain, Xander himself was not sure. When Xander left, his subordinates quickly followed in his footsteps without the slightest hesitation, as if they would be devoured by Cain if they stayed there any longer. After Xander led his subordinates away, another group of people approached Cain, led by none other than the fifth-ranked Soros, the young man with the sunny smile. Cain frowned when he saw Soros approaching. He approved of a true villain like Xander more than a hypocrite like Soros. Soros laughed cheerfully as he approached. "Haha, Cain, you're amazing, taking the top spot in one go. You've shocked a lot of people." He reached out to pat Cain on the shoulder. Seeing Soros' actions, Cain's eyebrows furrowed again and he took a step back, avoiding his hand. Soros' face became slightly embarrassed when his hand hit nothing but air, but he recovered in an instant, smiling again, yet deep in his eyes a cold glint was barely concealed. With a sneer in his heart, Cain said, "What is it?" "Haha." Soros laughed to hide his embarrassment. Usually, as long as he kept smiling, everyone would show him a little courtesy. He hadn't expected to be humiliated by Cain. He continued, "It's nothing important. I've just accepted a mission that's worth a lot of points, so I'd like to ask if you're interested in joining me. I'm afraid I'll have trouble completing it alone, but don't worry, the points we get will be split equally between the two of us." A mission that required two people to complete? Was it taken specifically to get closer to himself? Cain laughed coldly in his heart. This really was a lousy tactic. Not interested. With just those words, Cain turned away without looking back, leaving Soros with only the view of the back of his head. Watching Cain walk away without hesitation, Soros' smile immediately froze. His back was turned to his subordinates as his face grimaced, but he quickly returned to his original smile. "Since Cain isn't interested, it's better if we do it ourselves. After all, we're still on our own." Soros turned to his subordinates and said. Immediately, his subordinates sighed with disappointment that they hadn't been able to get Cain to join the team. Wasn't it just a mission where Soros led them and shared their points with Cain? It was he who suffered the loss. Chapter 32. As Cain turned to depart, a glimpse of Soros coughing caught his eye. Pokémon. Coughing. Dark yellow. Gender. Male. Level. 17. Type. Poison. Ability. Levitate. Held items. None. Egg moves. Stockpile. Basic moves. Poison gas. Tackle. Smog. Smokescreen. Assurance. Clear smog. Taunt moves. Haze. Technical machines. TMs none. The creature, though relatively strong and clearly well-trained, seemed to lack a certain spark of natural talent. "He's quite capable," Cain muttered to himself. He knew that a person with such cunning would generally fare well, so long as they were not exposed. And with that thought, Cain made his way once more to the exchange center. The test had just finished, and the place was yet to be crowded. Upon entering, the employee who had assisted him the day before recognized him immediately. Under the employee's questioning gaze, Cain simply nodded and gestured for him to lead the way to the mysterious man. The staff member was more anxious than Cain, knowing that the mysterious man had returned a while ago, while Cain was nowhere to be seen. He breathed a small sigh of relief when he saw Cain had finally arrived. With a quick look around to ensure no one was watching, he used his knuckles to tap a rhythmic code on the hidden door. Creak! With a faint, crisp sound, the hidden door opened. He motioned for Cain to hurry inside. After passing through the doorway, Cain and his companion, Murkrow, found themselves in a long dark hallway, where a few lit candles gave off a faint light to guide their way. The silent journey continued for a few minutes before they finally reached a large room. Half of the room was lined with bookshelves, and at a cursory glance, it was estimated that there were thousands of books. It was not easy to get such a large number of books in a place like Purgatory Island. A desk lamp was placed on a desk in the middle of the room, and the mysterious man in black robes was sitting in front of the desk, reading carefully, as if unaware of Cain's arrival. But Cain was not naive enough to believe that, and he gestured for Murkrow to land on the floor. He then respectfully walked over to the desk and waited for the mysterious man to finish reading. The mysterious man, noticing Cain's actions, allowed a small smile to play at the corners of his mouth, hidden under his black robes, before continuing to read his book. Time passed, and just as Murkrow was beginning to grow impatient, the mysterious man slowly raised his head. Looking at Cain, and then at Murkrow, his hoarse voice slowly rang out, "Help me retrieve an item, and I'll reward you with 10,000 points upon your return." With that, he took out a map from his pocket and placed it on the table, pushing it towards Cain without awaiting a response. Cain's pupils constricted as he saw the hand with only 2 fingers left exposed from under the black robe. He was all too familiar with this type of injury, the aftermath of a poisonous attack. To be able to inflict such a gruesome injury on the mysterious man, who was at least at the level of a senior elite, and force him to amputate his fingers, it was hard to imagine how strong the opponent must have been. Quickly suppressing his emotions, Cain took the map handed by the mysterious man and looked at it carefully. It had to be said that compared to the previous crude treasure map, this one was extremely detailed. Every landmark along the way was drawn in great detail. Without keeping the mysterious man waiting too long, Cain nodded, tucked the map into his storage belt, and said, "Yes, sir." With an indiscernible nod, the mysterious man waved his hand, signaling for Cain to leave. Without hesitation, Cain took Murkrow and prepared to depart. Suddenly, the mysterious man lowered his head and said, "My name is Umbra." Hearing Umbra's words, Cain lowered his raised foot and replied respectfully, "Yes, Mr. Umbra." Only after seeing that there were no further instructions from Umbra, Cain and Murkrow slowly left the room. As they stepped out of the hidden doorway, Cain's eyes struggled to adjust to the sudden change of light after being in darkness for so long, so he closed them for a moment, silently muttering to himself, "Umbra." After quietly leaving the exchange center, his thoughts turned to a rumor that had circulated within Team Rocket in his previous life. The 2 deputy leaders of Team Rocket's shadow unit were named Tenebris and Umbra. It was said that they were 2 orphans raised by Giovanni himself, and that he had given them those names. There were still traces of the existence of the 2 deputy leaders of the shadow unit, but the so-called leader of the shadow unit had never been seen by anyone other than Giovanni. It was even rumored that the position of the leader of the shadow unit had been left vacant because no one had the strength to meet Giovanni's requirements. Cain shook his head and smiled bitterly. All of this was too far removed from him. It was best to focus on completing the shadow unit's test mission. In Umbra's eyes, Cain didn't know the significance of the medal, because he had always hidden it very well. Cain was not averse to joining the shadow unit. Although the dangers he would face would be relatively greater, the opportunities and resources were also directly proportional, so it did not go against Cain's original intentions. But would the task Umbra had set for him really be that simple? This is just the beginning, huh? Cain thought with a bitter smile. Various supplies needed for the journey were prepared. Dressed in a white Team Rocket uniform and wearing his exclusive belt, Cain set out as a member of Team Rocket. Cain and Murkrow departed unnoticed, following the route mapped out by Umbra and disappearing into the forest. Purgatory Island was a semi-developed forest area, and as one of Team Rocket's most valuable assets, it was not overexploited for its various resources. The forest was well protected with a policy of long-term sustainability. The trees in the forest were tall and leafy, and the dense foliage overhead let only patches of light on the ground. As a result, the occasional cloud that would appear and block out the sun would make the forest seem a bit dreary. Due to the favorable environment, the forest was full of Pokémon that had been active for a long time and had left various tracks. If one could spot these Pokémon tracks, it would make traveling through the forest much easier. As Cain and Murkrow ventured deeper into the forest, the number of Pokémon increased, especially grass-type Pokémon, who quickly hid when they saw them approaching. Scattered weedles and caterpies slowly climbed up trees or diligently nibbled on leaves in anticipation of an early evolution. Even a few spinneracks and ladybuzz could sometimes be seen. Then there were the pidgeys and spearows, hiding in the canopy, occasionally coming out for a life-and-death chase with the bug-type Pokémon in the trees. Of course, in addition to Pokémon, there were many wild animals that often appeared in front of Cain. The AI system was always on, and any Pokémon that entered its detection range could not escape the system's scan. Even the well-camouflaged grass-type Pokémon were exposed, allowing the system to create a detailed data map. Since they were still at the edge of the forest, the Pokémon that appeared were not particularly powerful, and even if they were numerous, they posed little threat to Cain and Murkrow. Since it was already afternoon when they left, and the map showed that the distance was clearly not less than a day's journey, Cain planned to find a place with a water source, sleep there overnight, and continue tomorrow. With some luck, Cain managed to find a small, clear stream before nightfall. From the Pokémon footprints that covered the soft ground around it, Cain could tell that this was a safe place. Choosing a spot about 10 meters from the stream, Cain began to build a fire and set up his tent. Before setting out on this journey, Cain had prepared a tent, plus some bits and pieces of daily necessities and medical supplies, which had cost Cain a total of 200 points. Of course, the most expensive part was the medical supplies, which included some antidotes. Since he had the means to make himself more comfortable in the wilderness, Cain certainly wouldn't mind spending a little. After all, no normal person would want to live like a savage all the time, right? While Cain was setting up the tent, Murkrow was not idle either. He had been wearing the weighted device and training constantly. Flying around quickly, Murkrow picked up fallen branches and increased his speed to the extreme. He had fully integrated training into his life. Soon the sun had set, the tent was pitched, and the crackling and slight popping of the fire continued. Murkrow's food bowl had also changed from the original crude wooden one to a silvery metal bowl with a poke block inside, emitting a faint lemon-like scent. Cain drank his oatmeal, made from freshly boiled water with bread that had a milky aroma. The life of both man and Pokémon was completely different from what it had been a few days ago, going straight from the caveman era to the 1980s. Chapter 33. The stillness of night enveloped Cain and Murkrow as they drifted off to sleep in their tent, lulled by the melodic chirping of insects and the gentle rustle of leaves. When they awoke, the sun had risen, casting its fiery red glow upon the sky like a swollen, angry face. They set about rekindling their fire, preparing a nourishing breakfast, and beginning their daily training regimen. Cain focused on strengthening his body, while Murkrow honed his moves, knowing that dedication and persistence would ultimately lead to success. For, as the old saying goes, the work of the year must be done in the spring, and the work of the day must be done in the morning. And so, they trained with renewed vigor, knowing that their morning efforts would yield twice the results with half the effort. Murkrow had recently acquired 4 new moves from TMs: Protect, Substitute, Screech, and Dark Pulse. Each required extensive practice and mastery to be used effectively in battle. Except for Protect, which could not be trained in the traditional sense, the other 3 moves all required a significant amount of training in order to be used proficiently. Only through mastery could these moves truly be wielded in combat. Of particular importance were the 2 life-saving moves, Protect and Substitute, crucial for survival in the wild. Dark Pulse, as Murkrow's primary Dark-type move, was also a move that required constant training. All 4 moves were essential, each serving a unique purpose in various situations. In addition to these new moves, Murkrow also needed to continue training Wing Attack, which he had only recently acquired. Though the weight he carried had been strenuous, the constant training of his wings had naturally improved the power of his Wing Attack. Murkrow, use Dark Pulse on the large tree in front of you, commanded Cain, having completed his own training session and now lending his guidance to Murkrow's targeted training. Hearing the command, Murkrow nodded and focused his energy. An aura of pure malevolence radiated from his body as a wave of pitch-black dark energy gathered around him. With a surge of malice, he unleashed the energy onto the tree, crashing into it with formidable force. The ground trembled and the leaves rustled in the wake of Murkrow's Dark Pulse, as deep, jagged scratches marred the trunk of the tree he had targeted. A sinister hiss echoed through the clearing, the added effect of the dark energy. You see the damage caused by Dark Pulse now, don't you? That tree is still left standing with only some broken bark. Against most foes, the effects of the move may not be so striking, Cain observed, but don't be discouraged. You've just learned this move. With practice and control, you'll be able to focus the energy, making it all the more powerful. You'll be able to defeat even powerful psychic and ghost-type Pokémon with this move of yours. Murkrow nodded eagerly, determined to master this powerful move. Once again, the aura of malice surrounded Murkrow as he gathered the dark energy. Instead of releasing it wildly, he focused on controlling the spread, condensing the energy for maximum impact. After a few moments, when the energy had reached its peak, Murkrow unleashed Dark Pulse upon the tree once more. Bang! The ground shook less violently this time, but a finger-sized black hole appeared on the trunk of the tree, smoke rising from the wound. The attack was much more powerful than before. Murkrow was pleased with the progress he had made and determined to continue perfecting this move. Cain watched with pride as Murkrow's control of Dark Pulse improved, nodding in satisfaction. It was clear that Murkrow possessed a natural talent for energy control, a skill that could only be honed through constant exposure and training. Well done, Murkrow. By controlling the concentration of energy and minimizing unnecessary losses, you've increased the power of the move. Though the release time is still too slow, with more experimentation, you'll improve. Keep up the good work, Cain praised Murkrow, knowing that recognition and encouragement would only drive the Pokémon to work harder. Murkrow eagerly accepted the praise and redoubled his efforts. Cain couldn't help but smile, feeling honored to have such a gifted Pokémon under his tutelage. After an hour of training, Cain and Murkrow set out on their journey once more, the main objective being to fulfill Umbra's request. But basic training could not be neglected, for it would be a waste of both time and life. Murkrow, feeling refreshed after consuming some Pokeblocks, quickly regained his peak condition, even his aura appearing slightly enhanced. The invisible effects of Pokeblocks were undeniable, allowing for recovery in mere minutes as opposed to hours. With consistent use of Pokeblocks, the gap between Murkrow and other Pokémon would only continue to widen. The effectiveness of Pokeblocks made Pokémon breeders a highly sought-after commodity, even if they could only make the most basic Pokeblocks. A Pokémon breeder might not possess great strength, but they should never be underestimated. The relationships they hold and the favors they are owed by powerful individuals, like a hornet's nest, should not be trifled with. Cain and Murkrow had strayed from their path the day before in search of water, and now they must retrace their steps. As the sun rose, the forest came alive with the activity of Pokémon emerging under the warm rays. The entire forest teemed with vitality and energy. As they journeyed deeper, the Pokémon they encountered became fewer in number, but more alert and aware of their surroundings. Though from time to time, they would come across injured Pokémon lying on the ground or in trees, or even corpses. Cain and Murkrow paid little attention to these sights, but as they delved deeper into the forest, they remained vigilant, with Murkrow ever ready to strike. Their journey was made easier by the system's scanning function, ensuring that no Pokémon could get too close to Cain without being detected. In truth, under the system scanning, Cain had become aware of several Pokémon deliberately approaching him, even trailing him for quite some time. As he came to a stop, a pincer suddenly lunged out of the undergrowth, aiming for the vulnerable Cain. Caw! Murkrow, ever vigilant, reacted in an instant, using a combination of tailwind and feint attack to send the pincer flying. Cain couldn't help but laugh at the pincer's failed ambush, recognizing it as the same Pokémon that Murkrow had defeated before. But this time, it had learned from its mistake and wisely targeted Cain first. However, it was a mistake still, for even without Murkrow, the system had detected the danger and Cain's body was tensed and ready to dodge at a moment's notice. Crua! But the pincer had come prepared, as 3 more pincers leapt out of the surrounding grass upon hearing the cry. According to the system's scan, they were roughly as strong as the one before them. Cain laughed. How interesting, they've come as a group for a rematch. A few days ago, Murkrow had been able to defeat one of these pincers, let alone now that Murkrow has grown even more powerful. Even if he were to face these 4 pincers together, they would be easy to defeat. Kruch-eh! 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 The 4 pincers exchanged glances, and with a mutual understanding, they advanced on Cain as one. Having suffered defeat before, they knew that the seemingly weak creature before them was their greatest threat. Murkrow, screech! Cain commanded calmly, his expression unchanged. Chapter 34. Caw! A piercing screech echoed through the forest, causing the pincers to wince in pain. Never before had they heard such an ear-splitting sound, one that seemed to resonate in their very minds. Their bodies trembled involuntarily as they felt their hard exoskeletons weaken under the force of the noise. Murkrow, let's see the fruits of your labors, said Cain, a hint of devilry creeping into his voice as he pulled a remote control from his belt. With a wicked grin, he pressed the button, releasing Murkrow from the weight-bearing device that had held him back. Instantly, Murkrow felt his body lighten and soar, propelled forward by tailwind. Caw! Caw! He cried out in exhilaration, feeling as though he had become one with the wind itself. He had never expected that his training would yield such swift results, but after only a few days, his speed had increased dramatically. As he flew past, Cain couldn't help but smirk. At this velocity, the pincers ahead were nothing more than sitting ducks. Murkrow, stop playing around. Use Gust to hold down those 2 pincers in front of you, and then rush to take care of the 2 behind you with wing attack, ordered Cain. Murkrow nodded in understanding and, with a fierce flap of his wings, he summoned 2 powerful whirlwinds, halting the pincers' advance. Without hesitation, he turned and flew towards the pincers at his rear, his flying energy gathering around his wings. With a whistling sound, he appeared before them and, with a swift slash of his wings, sent the pincer on the left crashing into a tree, where it lay motionless. One-hit kill. With the defenses of his enemies weakened by Screech, Murkrow unleashed all of his might in his attack. Flying moves, already super effective against bug-type Pokémon, dealt double damage to the pincer, felling it in a single blow. But the remaining pincer was not so easily defeated. Roaring in rage, it slammed its horned head into Murkrow with a move called Vital Throw. Murkrow, use Protect. Follow that up with another wing attack and finish it off, commanded Cain. Obediently, Murkrow activated the mysterious energy stored within his body, creating a flowing, light green shield around himself. Though the shield shattered under Pincer's attack, it had done its job, stopping Pincer's move. With wings thick with flying energy, Murkrow struck Pincer without warning, the sound of cracking armor filling the air as the creature flew backwards and fell to the ground, joining its fallen companion. The 2 pincers that had been halted by Gust broke through, their scratched armor testament to the damage they had suffered. In disbelief, the pincer who had come seeking revenge watched as his 2 companions were defeated, unable to comprehend how Murkrow had grown so powerful. Murkrow, continue using Gust and then charge in for wing attack to finish them off, ordered Cain. With gusto, Murkrow unleashed 2 more whirlwinds, enveloping the pincers once more. Without hesitation, he obeyed Cain's orders, rushing into the whirlwind and unleashing a blinding light from his wings with 2 resounding bangs as the pincers were thrown out of the dissipating whirlwind, defeated. Caw! With a fierce cry, Murkrow paid no heed to the 2 pincers that lay defeated at his feet. It was the first time since joining Cain that he had fought so well. Cain stroked Murkrow's head fondly, his smile tinged with a hint of scolding. This is just the result of a short period of training. Don't let it go to your head and continue to work hard, he said, pleased with Murkrow's strength but wary of his pride. Caw! Murkrow croaked, eagerly assuring Cain that he was not proud, but only a little excited. Ha ha, very well, Cain laughed, ruffling Murkrow's feathers. You have seen the benefits of your usual training, have you not? He teased. Murkrow nodded eagerly, his small eyes shining with adoration. He was on the verge of becoming Cain's devoted follower. Ha ha ha. Cain flicked his finger against Murkrow's head and picked up the remote control, waving it in front of Murkrow. Are you ready to have the weight put back on? Murkrow froze, not yet having fully relished the feeling of being unencumbered. But he understood that Cain's intentions were good and, with reluctance in his heart, he nodded his agreement. Cain, noticing Murkrow's reluctance, knew it was not yet time for Murkrow to let his guard down. He reactivated the weight at the same 5 kilograms as before, and Murkrow immediately felt his body become heavy and his height drop slightly. But he quickly adjusted and was back to his previous position. Having grown accustomed to the weight, he was soon able to move normally. Under the scan of the system, Cain was surprised to see that Murkrow had leveled up after the battle. I'll keep quiet and let Murkrow believe it's the result of the weight training, so he'll train harder in the future, Cain thought to himself. One of the benefits of fighting in the wild was that there was no need to tidy up the battlefield afterwards. As the excitement of battle died down, the forest fell into silence. Seizing the opportunity, Cain and Murkrow quickly departed the area. This battle had been a small interlude, the only gain being that Murkrow had leveled up once again.